Hey guys. This is part 3 of What If Naruto Was Corrupted by Kyuubi's Evil Influence. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 13. To Trust a Demon. Sarutobi let out a smoke-filled sigh as he continued to watch the chaotic scene unfold. For the past 6 hours the old man had been forced to listen to nearly every single clan head question his mental status, or barring that insult his intelligence directly. Looking back, the Sandaime took note that virtually every single meeting involving Konoha's Jinchuriki eventually degraded into this. Suffice to say, Naruto's sudden decision to partake of the Chunin exams was not well received by the general public. Within 2 hours of the boy's official introduction into Team 7, the number of Leaf Nin who were participating in the exam was almost negligible. In fact, out of the 23 teams that were originally entered, only 5 of them remained. This bit of information wasn't exceptionally surprising. Actually, what surprised the Hokage more was the fact that there were still Konoha teams that chose to take the exam. Within the village hidden in the leaves, Naruto had a fearsome reputation. He was regarded from afar with the sort of careful respect that one would expect to see in a man who was being stared down by a tiger. Even the Anbu, the Hokage's right hand, wouldn't walk along the same street as him. This thing wasn't human. It didn't feel a shred of remorse for the atrocities it had committed, nor did it show an inkling of restraint when faced with an opponent. Naruto was a mindless, heartless killing machine, nothing more. This was the reason why Sarutobi was so surprised that 15 Konoha Nin had elected to remain in the exams. What was even more shocking was the fact that 3 of these teams were not only rookie squads, but also the future heirs to all of Konoha's most prominent clans. Hence the reason why all of the clan heads, excluding Aburame's Shibi, were in an uproar over this decision. Sarutobi couldn't exactly fault them for being so upset. Apart from Jiraiya, he was the only person who fought with the boy and lived. He knew exactly how scary the boy could be. The sound of a fist slamming against the table jarred the old man from his thoughts. This is bullshit. A very irate Inuzuka-tsum spat. How can you let a monster like that compete against our children? People die during these exams, Sarutobi. To be put in the same room with that thing is a death sentence. You would do well to remember whom you're speaking with, Inuzuka-san, Hamura said warningly. You will show the proper respect towards the Hokage. Like hell I will. The Inuzuka matriarch shot back. I don't care if he's Kami itself, I'm not gonna sit on my ass and let that demon kill my son. A few heads nodded in agreement. In the chair to Sarutobi's right, Jiraiya leaned forward towards the fuming Tsum. Hold your tongue, Inuzuka, he growled dangerously. I won't let slide another comment like that. Tsum's eyes narrowed at the Toad Sage, but she did as he said. Danzo spoke, for once in agreement with his Hokage. You're allowing your emotions to control you, Inuzuka-san. As a ninja, you know full the dangers that come with this line of work. The prospect of death is something that you should have come to grips with long ago. Some grit her teeth. Of course I'm prepared for the eventuality of death, you idiot, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to go traipsing through IWA. I'm prepared to die. My son is prepared to die. Everyone at this table is prepared to die, but that doesn't mean we actively seek out death. Again, the other clan heads nodded. Jiraiya frowned. Your actions say otherwise. A uniform look of confusion spread across the faces of those who were present. Naruto, the Sannin continued, has never been one to take no for an answer. He's a proud creature, so proud in fact that the act of debating this issue might be enough of an insult to warrant our deaths. I know Naruto better than anyone here. I know exactly how scary that boy can be when he's denied something that he wants. That is why I know that we cannot bar Naruto from the exams. He would raise Konoha to the ground just to spite us. However, I don't think that this is the case. Naruto rarely takes interest in ninja matters, so for him to demand so suddenly that he be placed in the exams, it just doesn't fit. If the boy wanted to kill Leaf Nin, he would have just done so. Therefore, I can only conclude that this isn't about killing. Well, at least not entirely. Though it seems strange, I don't think any of your children will be in any real danger as long as they avoid Naruto. I know him, Or to be more specific, I know how much he hates fighting a weak opponent. Naruto won't go out of his way to attack your children. He's too proud for that. For a long time nobody spoke, all of them too busy trying to digest the Toad Sage's words. Jiraiya-sama. The monotone voice of Aburaim Shibi broke the silence. Logic dictates that the only person who knows of the boy's motives better than you would be the boy himself. The air became noticeably tense. I suggest that we bring Naruto here so that he himself can tell us his intentions. Shikaka sent the man an incredulous look. Is this what passes for humor in the Aburaim clan? Surely you can't be serious. Of course I'm serious, the insect wielder replied. If what Jiraiya-sama says is true, we are either safe or we are as good as dead already. In either case, Naruto has already decided our fates. Again a long silence descended on the table. Shikaka finally spoke. Let Naruto explain himself. Choza looked at his old friend before he also spoke. If both the Nara and the Aburaim see no fault in this decision, I must also agree with them. Hyuga Hayashi gave the faintest of nods. I can only hope that your words are true, Jiraiya-sama. Yamanaka Inoichi also nodded. From what my daughter told me, the beast is not bound by his thirst for blood. She has met him on several occasions, and not once did the boy harm her. For me, that is enough. Both Koharu and Hamura nodded. The world thinks us weak. Danzo spoke. But this boy, he is powerful. We must show our enemies that Konoha is still a force to be reckoned with. We must allow the boy to compete. Some scoffed. You've all gone mad. This boy is a killer, and yet all of you are ready to welcome him with open arms. I haven't forgotten what that monster did to my clan. I won't let more lives be lost on the basis of fear. We are the council, Jiraiya stated. The Hokage must be the one who decides. All eyes in the room fell on Sarutobi. The old man breathed out another cloud of smoke before answering. Umbu. A ninja with a tiger mask appeared. Yes, Hokage-sama? Bring Uzumaki Naruto to me. Of course, Hokage-sama. The ANBU replied before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Not 2 minutes later a pillar of ruby chakra erupted from the center of the room, signaling the arrival of Konoha's monster. Upon seeing the boy, many of the faces present contorted into a look of utter hatred. Naruto grinned at their reaction. Humans were such amusing creatures. His crimson gaze shifted to the Sandaime. Why have you called me here, Sarutobi? The old man spoke in a tired voice. You know why you've been called here, Naruto. Please don't waste our time. The Jinchuriki's grin only widened. Well, since you said please. The boy put his hands behind his back and walked towards the large bay window behind the Hokage's main desk. The scarlet-orange light of the dying sun filtered through the window, reflecting off of the smoke and soot that filled the room and making it seem as though the entire office was filled with neon mist. You're worried about what I might do during the exams, the boy said without turning away from the window. A murmur of agreement flowed through the room. Naruto gave an amused chuckle. And to think your race labels mine as the proud one. What do you mean, Uzumaki-sama? Shibi questioned emotionlessly. Uzumaki-sama, you say? My, we are formal, aren't we, Aburaim-san? The demon container turned to face the man. Allow me to answer your question with one of my own. Does anyone here think that they can stand before my power? The tension in the air grew thick, and although there were many angry faces among the clan heads, no one said anything. Again Naruto grinned. I thought as much. None of you have the strength to face me. None of you are worth the mess you'll make, and yet for some reason you think your children are. I don't know whether I should laugh or be insulted. Hayashi's pale eyes narrowed. You're saying that you will not harm our children? The boy's eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh heavens no, Hyuga-san. Rest assured that if your children cross me they will die. I simply meant that they're not worth my time. As long as they don't get in my way, I'll have no reason to kill them. You're treading on thin ice, boy. Some snarled. If I catch even a whisper that you're planning to harm my son, I'll kill you without a second thought. Small sparks of vermilion light began to jump across the boy's body, and with a sound akin to steel on stone Naruto's talons sprang from his hands. Is that a fact? The Jinchuriki whispered dangerously. I give you my word and still you question my motives. Kiba is my teammate. If I kill him I won't be able to enter the finals. And believe me when I tell you that that is the only thing that's keeping me from ripping him apart. That last comment was the breaking point. Tsum howled in rage and leapt for the boy. Naruto made no motion to dodge, and the Inuzuka matriarch rammed her kunai deep into the boy's chest. Naruto's vice-like grip wrapped around the woman's wrist, and with an audible crack snapped her wrist as the bones were made of straw. Tsum didn't even have time to register the damage that had been done to her wrist before white-hot pain exploded from her chest. She looked down, dazedly realizing that Naruto had lodged 5 razor-sharp claws firmly in her stomach. Even as Anbu began to come out of the woodwork, the boy remained eerily calm. He leaned closer to Tsum. "If you survive the night, you are forgiven." And with that he let the woman fall to the ground. The Inuzuka's body didn't even have time to touch the floor before being caught by an Anbu guard. The man disappeared through the forest of animal masks, and the remaining Anbus slowly began to advance on the boy. Naruto's hands formed a window-like seal. "I think I've played this game before, and if I recall correctly, I think I won. Want to press your luck and try again?" "Halt!" The Anbu did so, heeding the word of their Hokage immediately. Sarutobi rubbed his eyes wearily, making a shooing gesture with his other hand. "Your services are no longer required." Without a word, the Anbu disappeared. Naruto's grin faded and he dropped the seal. "Not worth my time anyway." "Naruto." Jiraiya sighed. "If you want people to do things for you, it's not exactly a good idea to attack them." The boy sent his mentor a hard look. "I was defending myself. I was under the impression that a shinobi had the right to defend himself." His gaze shifted to the council. "I'm not wrong, am I?" The cloud of insects behind Shibi slowly retreated into his coat. "What Uzumaki-sama says is true. Although she was goaded into attacking him, Inuzuka-san should have been able to control herself better." The other clan head sent the man a wary look. Logically, if Uzumaki-sama wanted us dead, he wouldn't have cancelled his jutsu. That argument seemed to carry a bit more weight, and gradually the other ninja relaxed their guard. "So," Naruto grinned. "Do I make the cut?" XXXXXXX. "It's a genjutsu," Sasuke whispered to his teammate. "I know," Kiba growled, annoyed at the other boy's lack of faith in him. Team 7 currently found themselves standing on the second floor of the academy, the path in front of them blocked by a mass of genin standing outside a door labeled 301. "Come on," one of the genin whined. "Let us through so we can take the exam." One of the 2 genin who were standing guard in front of the room laughed. "No way," he jeered. "If you guys are this weak, then you have no right to be in these exams." "He's right," the other genin said darkly. "People die in these exams, you know." The boy's words had the desired effect, and a few of the genin started shaking. Really?" one of the boys asked. "Really," a steel-hard voice answered from behind him. The crowd turned to face the newcomers. "I suggest you all get out of my way," Naruto stated coldly. A Miss Nin stepped forwards. "Oh yeah? And just what are you gonna do if we don't?" In one fluid motion, the Jinchuriki wrapped his hand around the boy's throat and slammed the genin's head through a nearby wall. The boy's limbs twitched sporadically for a few seconds before his body went still. Less than a second passed before the other squads began scrambling to get out of the way of Naruto and his team. As they began to climb the next flight of stairs, both Kiba and Sasuke began to get the distinct feeling that Kami hated them. XXXXXXX. As a genin, Kiba had never been very fond of room 301. Back when they were academy students, this was the room where they took all of their written exams. Even though it had been changed since he'd graduated, Kiba couldn't help but recall the hours of boredom that he'd endured in this room. "Yoo-hoo! Sasuke-kun! Kiba!" The Inuzuka's eyes widened when he heard that voice. "There's no way." Slowly the boy turned to face a familiar blonde girl. "Ino?" A smile spread on the boy's face. "How did you get here? I thought you weren't going to be in the exams after." His eyes shifted towards Naruto. "You know." "Oh, that wasn't a very big problem. After all," she winked, "I'm the number 1 kunoichi of our graduating class." And yet somehow she still manages to be troublesome. Shikamaru drawled as he and Chuji took their place behind Ino. This comment earned him an elbow to the ribs and a few less than ladylike phrases about laziness and pineapple hair. Kiba laughed at his friend's predicament. You better be careful what you say around her, Shika. She might just kick your ass. Shikamaru was about to say something, but the sudden opening of the door drew his attention. His pupils shrank as Shino, Hinata, and a certain pink-haired Kunoichi walked through the door. Troublesome, he mumbled in a far-off tone. Chuji also seemed to shrink back. What? Kiba turned to look at the new arrival, and slowly it dawned on him. Oh crap. Sasuke Kyuin! Sakura cried as she launched herself onto the Uchiha's back. In spite of the fact that he had a flailing girl on his back, Sasuke actually managed to remain looking fairly cool. Sorta. Hey, get off him, forehead girl. Sasuke's mine! Ino yelled as she too glomped onto Sasuke. The sound of derisive laughter sounded from behind Kiba. Don't tell me you're just going to leave him to his fate, Inuzuka. The boy scowled as he looked toward his other teammate. Naruto grinned. Even I'm not that cruel. Kiba continued to glare at the demon child, and slowly the boy's smile faded. But seriously, if you don't shut them up soon, I'm going to kill someone. Yash! Exclaimed a spandex-clad genin who seemed to have materialized from out of nowhere. What an unyouthful reaction to such a beautiful displays of affection. You should be ashamed. The boy's speech was cut short by a girl's hand clamping down over his mouth. You'll have to forgive Lee. She laughed nervously. He's kind of an idiot. Naruto looked at the strange-looking ninja in the girl's grasp and then back to her. So it would seem. For his own safety, don't let him near me again. Yeah, no problem. The girl replied quickly before pulling her struggling teammate off into the crowd. Humans. Killer H, you must be even more sadistic than I am. Hey! You kids want to settle down a bit. A boy with glasses and silver hair called out as he walked towards the group of enthusiastic genin. The rookie squads all turned to look at him. Naruto's eyes locked with those of the newcomer, and a wicked smile slowly spread across his face. What are you up to, snake in the grass? With the exception of Naruto, nobody else noticed the brief look of horror that crossed the boy's face. Snake in the grass? No, you got it all wrong. I'm a leaf nin just like you guys. We gotta look out for one another, you know. I just thought I should tell you guys to calm down a bit. A lot of the people here are itching for a fight, so you don't want to give them any reason to start one with you. The boy rubbed the back of his head. I made that mistake my first time through and wound up in the hospital before the exams had even started. Your first time? Chuji questioned. If you don't mind me asking, how many times have you taken the exam, Mr. Kabuto? The bespectacled shinobi answered. And I've taken the exam 7 times. A small smile formed on Sasuke's face. Then you must know a thing or two about the exams, right? Maybe a little bit. Kabuto adopted a modest look. Well, the exam itself changes from year to year, but I can tell you what I know about the other teams. He pulled a stack of white cardboard from his pocket. These are my ninja info cards. Everything that you could ever want to know about the competition is sealed inside these. He drew a card from the top of the deck, and after channeling some chakra into it, a map of the 5 great shinobi nations appeared. Pretty cool, huh? Perhaps. Sasuke responded. Do you have any information on the applicants themselves? Of course. Is there anyone in particular that you want me to look up? Uzumaki Naruto. The Uchiha answered. The group of genin turned to look at the boy in question. For his part, Naruto didn't seem to care all that much. Shooting high, Uchiha? The demon child grinned. I think I've been insulted. Don't cross him, Kabuto said in a cold voice. He's a Jinchuriki. A confused look came over Sakura's face. A Jinchuriki? What's that? A Jinchuriki is a person who has a tailed beast sealed inside them. You guys might have been too young to remember what Naruto did when he was a child, but me. Kabuto shivered. Don't fight him. If you're lucky, he'll only kill you. The group went silent. One by one, his fellow leaf nin began to back away from him. Naruto didn't even seem to notice them. No, he was far too interested in the red-haired boy who continued to stare at him. Chapter 14, Torture. Gaara's scowl deepened as his malevolent jade eyes continued to burn into those of the blonde. There was something about the boy, something about his presence that made Gaara want to crush the life out of him. Perhaps it was his insufferable grin, his unnecessarily loud clothing, or perhaps it was merely the way he carried himself, but one thing was certain, this boy would die. Unconsciously, a few tendrils of sand began to pour out from the gourd on his back, reacting to the rising bloodlust within the one whom they called master. Slowly, like a desert viper, the sand slithered through the crowd of genin towards the grinning boy. "Why are you smiling, you idiot?" the redhead whispered mockingly as his own face twisted into a grin. "Don't you realize you're going to die?" To his right, Temari took a few steps back. "Are you okay, Gaara?" Her brother didn't even seem to hear her. "You won't be smiling much longer," the Sunanin hissed. "How will you taste, I wonder?" "Delicious. Your blood will satisfy Mother." "Gaara is a good boy, isn't he, Mother?" The sand slowly wrapped its way around the boy's leg, but instead of reacting in terror, as Gaara had expected, his grin only seemed to widen. The coil of sand that continued to climb up his leg was all but ignored, forgotten as the boy's eyes once again locked with his own. It had been a long time since Redhead had been afraid. After all, with Mother watching over him, what use did he have for an emotion like fear? Nothing could hurt him, nothing could stop him. But those eyes, those sinister crimson eyes, inside of them lay something truly scary. The sand on the boy's leg fell to the ground and disappeared back into the crowd, a fact that went completely unnoticed by the boy as his ruby eyes remained securely on his own. Gaara took a step back, a look of blank horror forming on his face as the boy took a step forward. "Gaara?" Kankuro asked nervously. "What's the matter?" The puppeteer's blood ran cold. His psychotic little brother wasn't afraid of anything, he couldn't be. After their father, Gaara was the strongest ninja in all of Suna. He'd seen grown men break down in tears at the sight of his brother, he'd seen ninja throw their lives away rather than be paired with Gaara for a mission. What in the name of Kami could possibly be worse than Gaara? He followed his brother's wide-eyed gaze, and instantly wished he hadn't. Fangs barred, eyes alight with wicked intent, the object of Gaara's terror unhurriedly walked closer as the crowd of genin hurried to get out of his way. Gaara's mind was a mess of emotions. One part of him screamed for the boy's blood. It yearned to feel his fragile body shatter under the unrelenting pressure of the desert sand, hungered for his body to be coated in the sticky heat of the boy's blood. And yet another part of him railed against the idea. It was like a panicky whisper inside his head, pleading with him to leave this place, leave this boy, and run far, far away. Naruto's eyes glimmered dangerously. "Such hate and fear in your eyes, little desert rat. I do hope you aren't planning to do something stupid." The scowl on Gaara's face returned as the boy got closer still. "If you take another step, I'll kill you." The demon child came to a stop. Still grinning, Naruto slowly tilted his head. "Kill me?" He chuckled softly. "Do you think this course of action wise, desert rat?" Gaara's sand swirled around him angrily. "Who are you?" Naruto shook his head theatrically. "People are so rude these days. If you want my name, perhaps you should give me yours first." The Sannin said nothing. "So impolite." The demon vessel sighed. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I trust that now you'll tell me yours?" "Gaara." The boy deadpanned. "Sabaka no Gaara." "Sabaka no Gaara," Naruto repeated. "Well then, Gaara, if you ever try to kill me again, I'll make you wish you'd never been born." The sand on the floor began to move. "Is that a fact?" Naruto's only response was to extend his claws. Suddenly a massive cloud of smoke exploded from the front of the room, signaling the arrival of nearly 3 dozen leaf nin. A muscular man whose face was littered with scars stepped out of the smoke. An ugly sneer came onto the man's face. "Funds over maggots. Now shut up and form ranks." The throng of Chunin hopefuls tore their attention away from the Jinchuriki staring contest and began to quickly get into position. Naruto smirked and began to walk away. "It seems that you'll have to kill me another time, desert rat." Gaara's eyes narrowed. "So it seems." Gradually the ninja in the room began to quiet down. The large man at the front of the room nodded. "Good. Now then, my name is Marino Ibiki, head of Konoha's Torture and Interrogation Division of ANBU Black Ops, as well as the proctor for the first stage of the Chunin exams." Ibiki turned to the blackboard and quickly scribbled out a few lines of text. The first line simply read, "Plans built on uncertainty are doomed to failure." The second line read, "Everyone breaks eventually." He placed the chalk back in its tray and turned to face the crowd. "Can anybody tell me what the first line means?" Sakura was the one to answer. The first line that you wrote is the 14th rule of shinobi conduct. It means that if you don't have the proper intel for a situation, then you can't develop a sound plan of action. Ibiki smirked. Very good. But how do you know if your information is accurate? Sakura gave the man a blank look. By making the enemy tell it to you straight, replied a gruff voice. Ibiki turned his attention to the mohawked Cloud Nin, who answered. And how are you going to accomplish that? By torturing him. A few of the genin squirmed and Ibiki smiled darkly. That's correct. In the ninja world, nothing is more precious than information. The success of the mission, as well as your lives and the lives of your teammates, will often depend on quality of the data that you've been given. With the right knowledge, a man can infiltrate a fortress with no trouble at all. Likewise, if you have no knowledge of a situation, or even worse, false knowledge, there's a very good chance that your mission will end in failure. The scarred man again wrote on the board, continuing to speak as he did so. Assassin, mercenary, saboteur, thief, he paused and circled that last one. And spy. No doubt you all recognize these as the 5 basic roles of a ninja. This is why information is such a commodity, he tapped the circled word. Because we're surrounded by liars. Sometimes while you're out in the field, you'll be forced to interrogate an enemy in order to come up with a sufficient plan. But here's the kicker, your prisoner is a liar by trade, and you can be damn sure that he's try his best to get you killed. So as ninja, it's absolutely vital that you can differentiate between what is true and what is a lie. There is another side to this. Ibiki tapped the second line of text. If you ever find yourself at the mercy of the enemy, this is the only thing that is constant. No matter who you are, no matter what clan you come from, no matter what rank you are, the fact will remain, everyone breaks. Ibiki caught sight of the still madly grinning Naruto. Well, almost everyone. If you are captured, your only chance will be to stall until either your allies arrive, or you figure out how to escape. In both cases, this must be done quickly. Both the human mind and the human body are surprisingly fragile. Here is the test. Out of every 3-man squad, one of you will be selected to play the role of the prisoner. The prisoner will be given 2 pieces of information, the room number in which their interrogator's teammate is being held, and also the room number in which the next stage of the exams take place. In order to pass this portion of the exam, you must arrive at the correct location with your missing teammate within 1 hour of the exam starting. If either team is able to break their prisoner and discover the room in which their captured teammate is being held, then both teams will fail. Let me get this straight, a grass Nin called out. Someone in our squad is going to be tortured. You can't be serious. A murmur of agreement passed through the crowd. Ibiki smiled. Oh, I'm dead serious, but if you don't like, feel free to leave. He waited for a few seconds, but nobody moved. Excellent, now it's time for the rules. Rule 1, you can't kill your prisoner. Do so, and you'll be charged with murder. Damn it! Cried a frustrated voice. A few teams laughed at the outburst, but the majority of the genin looked afraid. Rule 2, you can't cause any permanent injury to your prisoner. Anything like blinding, crippling, or deforming will also result in an immediate disqualification. You are allowed to give your prisoner a couple of new scars if you like, just nothing that will impede their abilities as a ninja. Rule 3, there is nothing that prevents the prisoner from trying to escape. In fact, this is encouraged. Since the prisoner will be given the room number of his own team, and the room number in which the next phase begins, those who escape can easily pass the test. Any questions? Naruto stepped forward. You said that it was forbidden to kill the prisoner. If you are the prisoner, is it also forbidden to kill your captors? Ibiki rubbed his eyes tiredly. No. If you're the prisoner, it is legal to kill your captors. Many of the faces in the crowd went pale and a few teams walked out of the room. Though it is not encouraged, it is legal to kill your captors. There will be ninjas stationed inside every single room, so if you feel that you are in danger of being killed, you are able to forfeit. If you do so, the proctor in your room will break up the fight. Now, if there's nothing else, we will begin pairing the teams. A chunin took out a clipboard and began to read a list of names. After a few minutes, Naruto's ears perked up. Konoha Team 7 will pair with IWA Team 2. The prisoners will be Uzumaki Naruto and Fabium Nashi. Will the prisoners please step forward? Both Kiba and Sasuke watched in disbelief as Naruto walked forward towards the proctor. It looks like we lucked out, Kiba whispered to his teammate. If they're interrogating Naruto, we're guaranteed a spot in the second round. He's gonna tear them apart. Sasuke didn't answer. He just watched as the Chunin whispered the numbers into Naruto's ear before leading the IWA team off to their deaths. The proctor finished whispering the numbers into Nashi's ear and gestured at the pair to come over. Sasuke nudged Kiba's arm. Let's go, mutt. This is going to be ugly. XXXXXX. The Kusanin found himself in a tiny concrete room shackled to the wall. Glaring down at him were two of the scariest ninja that he'd ever laid eyes on. One of them, the smaller of the two giants, just leaned off in a corner mumbling something about rhymes as he scribbled something down in his notepad. The other one, the one with the mohawk and the beard who'd answered the questions earlier, was standing uncomfortably close. The Chunin proctor took a seat against the far wall and pulled out a stopwatch. You may begin. The big one turned to his teammate. You want this one, B? I've done this shit so much it's not even fun anymore. Killer B looked at T. Before he was demoted back to a genin, T was the head of the Kumo ANBU interrogation unit. It went way beyond unfair for him to use his skills against a genin. Oh well, life sucks. Out in the field I'm the combat king, but interrogation is your thing. I'll just stay out of your way and let you go ahead and play. Suit yourself, the behemoth muttered. You gonna talk? The grass nin said nothing. T sighed. Man, I pity the fool who doesn't talk to me. The Cloud Nin's massive mitt clamped down on the boy's head, and after a few seconds a fountain of sparks began crackle and fizz. The boy screamed in agony as the lightning chakra began to attack the nerves in his brain, manipulating his nervous system into thinking that his entire body was in excruciating pain. I'll talk, the boy screamed as he writhed against the wall. Please, I'll talk. He stopped channeling electricity through his hand and savagely wrenched the boy's head up by his hair. You gonna talk now? Tears continued to roll down the boy's cheeks. The second stage is in room 78. Your partner is being held in room 32. T quirked an eyebrow and sparks began to pour from his free hand. I think you're lying. The grass nin's eyes went wide. No! Please don't hurt me again. I'm telling the truth, I swear. T's hand inched closer. Why should I believe you? His prisoner began howling in terror as tears once again began to trickle down his face. I've got no reason to lie, he sobbed brokenly. T let go of the boy's hair and turned to B. He's telling the truth. The Kumo Jinchuriki quickly wrote down the rest of his rap before flipping the notebook closed and following his teammate out of the room. XXXXXX. Shikamaru grunted as again the Taki Nin's fist slammed across his face. Give us the numbers, the large boy demanded. The lazy genin spat a bit of blood onto the floor. Sorry, but it's too troublesome. I'm more afraid of the beating that I'd receive from Ino than I am of you. Oh really? The other boy grinned as he pulled out a kunai. Well, I guess we're gonna have to cut it out of you. Me and my big mouth. Be careful, Mizikai, if you kill him we'll get disqualified. The larger boy warned. Yeah, don't worry. I'm just gonna mess up his face a little bit. You know, make it difficult for him to get a date. The kunai drew closer and closer to Shikamaru's face, and suddenly the steel door swung open. Hey Shikamaru. Are you having a good time with these guys? The two Takinin whipped around, their eyes wide and their mouths ageki. They got beaten by a fat guy and a chick. No way. You guys broke Agamo already. Chuji grinned as the proctor released his friend from the restraints. Well yeah, of course we did. Ino's a mind reader, so figuring out what the num. Ino elbowed him in the stomach. Honestly Chuji, how did you ever become a ninja? Come on Shikamaru, let's get out of here while we still have some of our secrets intact. The shadow user rubbed his bruised jaw and began to follow after his team. Troublesome girl. XXXXXXX. Niji watched dispassionately as Tenten continued to whip Senban into a Kiri shinobi. It had been almost 10 minutes since the exam began, and in that time the girl had done a pretty good job of turning the ninja into a cactus. His arms and legs were littered with needles, so many in fact that it was nothing short of a miracle that the boy was still able to stand. Niji winced as one of the Senban came dangerously close to hitting something very painful indeed. If nothing else, the Hyuga had to admire this idiot's dedication. Ah man, I missed. Tenten mumbled. Maybe if I aim little lower. The Mist Nin's eyes widened in horror. Okay. I'll talk. Niji activated his Byakugan and stepped forward. I'm listening. The room where your teammate is being held is room 23. To get to the next phase of the exam, you need to go to room 45. He's lying, Niji stated. The Mist Nin cried out in pain as a chakra-coated finger jammed into the juncture between his neck and shoulder. But I'm telling the truth again, the boy's scream cut off the end of what he was saying. Niji retracted his fingers. My eyes are all seeing, so lying will be of no use to you. I also advise you to tell us the real numbers, or else 1010 might make your life very miserable. The bun-haired girl pulled out a war hammer and winked at the boy. Oh fuck this, I'm not getting my balls crushed over a test. The real numbers are 65 and 78. Room 65 is where your teammate is being held. Niji looked at 1010. That was the truth. The girl pouted as she followed the Hyuga out of the room. That was actually kinda fun. XXXXXX. Temari and Kankuro leaned against the wall, patently watching the Rain Nin, who was affixed to the wall. As soon as the exam had begun, Kankuro had injected a hallucinogenic toxin into the girl, and now it was time to play the waiting game. The poison that now flowed through the girl's veins was incredibly dangerous, and if left alone it would kill her. The venom's effect was twofold. Not only did it attack the nervous system, causing delusions, but it also attacked the muscles, something that was, if the girl's violent twitches were any indication, very painful. Eventually the poison would leave her brain dead, but the toxin didn't reach that stage of damage for nearly a week, ample time to keep her from dying. The sound of the steel door scraping open suddenly had both them on high alert. Either the Rain team had broken Gaara, unlikely as it may be, or Gaara had broken the Rain team. Literally. The sickeningly sweet smell of freshly spilled blood told them that it was the latter. Kankuro got up and injected the girl with the antidote before turning to face his brother. Other than a few smears of blood on his clothes, Gaara looked completely unchanged. Temari, Kankuro, we're leaving, he drawled neutrally. The pair exchanged an uneasy look before following their brother out of the room. XXXXXX. Teammate had been very unlucky. As it was, Hinata had been chosen to be the other team's prisoner, and while the girl was a kind-hearted friend, they all knew that she was the weakest member of their team. It had taken the other team only 15 minutes to break the girl. Shino cradled the bloodied girl gently as he undid her manacles and set her on the floor. Without another word, he moved to the side so that Sakura could begin her work on healing the girl. I am really sorry. Hinata stuttered through tears. I am a failure. Sakura wiped a tear from her teammate's eye. Shh, don't worry about it, Hinata. I don't blame you for what happened, and neither does Shino. Just rest up and concentrate on feeling better. Hinata gave her a meek nod but still didn't stop crying. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that bad. After all, the next exam was only 6 months away, and at least then they wouldn't have to deal with that psycho Naruto. XXXXXX. Naruto watched in a sort of detached amusement as the IWA Nin buried a kunai to its hilt in his arm. Tell me the numbers, the ninja screamed, again ramming his blade into the boy's body. Oh come now, Naruto jeered. Surely you can do better that. The stone Nin tore the blade out of his prisoner's chest and drove it into the Jinchuriki's groin. Once more Naruto didn't even flinch. How quaint. The boy smirked. Care to try again? His captor cried out in rage as he threw the kunai to the ground. What the fuck was wrong with this kid? They'd been alternating between beating and stabbing him for the past 20 minutes, and still the boy showed no sign of telling them the numbers. A sharp metallic crack drew the IWA Nin's attention. The boy didn't even have time to react before Naruto's claws connected with his head, splitting the genin's skull into 5 neatly sliced sections. The other stone Nin opened his mouth to say something but soon found himself unable, seeing as how the boy's words were quite literally punched back down his throat. Naruto tore his gore-drenched arm out of the IWA Nin's chest, letting the boy's carcass fall haphazardly onto the floor. He turned to face the now armed Chunin proctor. No, don't get up, I'll let myself out. XXXXXX. Sasuke groaned in frustration as he regarded their prisoner. Within the first few minutes of the exam, it had become apparent that Nashi had some kind of Kekkei Genkai. Kiba had nearly broken his fist when he first punched the boy, and it seemed that not even blades could pierce his rock-hard skin. They'd had to make do with his minimal knowledge of genjutsu which, even with his Sharingan active, had been all but ineffectual. Door behind him slammed open and in walked their missing teammate. A small smile came across Kiba's face. Well, I guess we pass. Where's the next stage of the exams being held I mean, Uzumaki-sama? A vicious grin spread across the Jinchuriki's face as his eyes settled on the IWA nin. I can't seem to remember. He murmured in a far-off manner. Perhaps I can get him to tell us. The shackled stone nin sent Sasuke a confused look. What's he mean? I thought you guys won. The Uchiha just shook his head. Believe me when I say that I'm sorry, kid. He took a few steps back. Have at him, Uzumaki-sama. Naruto walked forward and effortlessly jammed his talons into the boy's arm. Nashi screamed in pain as the boy slowly retracted the blades from his arm. What is the number? The sudden loss of blood caused the boy to feel like he was underwater. W what? Naruto's eyes narrowed. What country are you from? Nashi shook his head in confusion. What? What do I what? The Jinchuriki slammed his fist through the wall near the boy's head. What ain't no county I've ever heard of? They speak English in what? The stone nin's eyes darted to the boy's arm. What? Naruto's claws slashed across Nashi's face. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? The stone nin recoiled in pain. Yes. Yes. So you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Naruto turned and began to walk away. So perchance you could tell me what the magic number is? Magic number? I thought he wanted to know where I came from. The boy's head swung to the side. What? Naruto whipped around, hurling a steel globe at near Mach speed toward the IWA nin. The cannonade missed the boy's head by mere centimeters, all but demolishing the concrete wall behind him. Say what again? Say what again? I dare you! I double dare you, motherfucker! Say what one more goddamn time! Room 78. Nashi cried. Room 78, just please leave me alone. Naruto turned back to his wide-eyed teammates. Oh silly me, how could I forget, but I guess it doesn't really matter now. And with that Naruto left the room. Chapter 15, Training Ground 44. For Sasuke and Kiba, the walk to room 78 was anything but pleasant. The corridor that provided access to the numerous interrogation chambers was dark and cramped, their only source of light coming from the occasional light bulb that buzzed on the ceiling overhead. Shadows twisted and slithered across the grimy stone floor, formless terrors brought to life by the unsettling red glow that came from Naruto's eyes. Every few seconds the silent atmosphere was broken by an anguished scream coming from inside one of the rooms, a sound that was only half as unnerving as the blonde's amused chuckling that followed shortly thereafter. Both genin were beginning to feel extremely claustrophobic at the thought of being in such close proximity with their teammate, Kiba much more so than the ever-calm Sasuke. The sticky sweet stench of gore that wafted back from the Jinchuriki was wreaking havoc on his heightened senses. Again a scream reverberated around the hallway, the sound magnified 100 times thanks to his keen ears. In his jacket, Akamaru whined pitifully as Naruto once again began to chuckle. The little dog's hearing was far better than his own, and as such only Akamaru was able to pick up the barest hints of a predator's growl in the boy's droning laughter. Kiba's eyes narrowed as he continued to stare at the back of Naruto's head. At the moment, he wanted nothing more than to drive a kunai up to its hilt in the boy's skull. It was a cruel joke that Kami had gifted the boy with such unimaginable power. Naruto was a monster who killed those who were weaker than himself for little more than sport. Kiba clenched his teeth as thoughts of his hospitalized mother were dragged to the forefront of his mind. The Inuzuka were fiercely loyal to their friends, and even more so to one another. For this thing to attack the matriarch of their clan was an unforgivable crime, and as soon as he was able to, Kiba would exact the clan's vengeance on the boy. From inside one of the rooms, there was a loud metallic bang followed by terrified cry of "They're eating my head." Both Kiba and Sasuke took a few steps back as Naruto burst out into hysterical laughter, mumbling something about pirates and good times. Kiba shuddered. Man, was he not looking forward that? Sasuke's mind was filled with similar thoughts. As much as he hated Naruto, he feared him even more so. And the thought sickened him. The Sharingan wielder felt anger beginning to flow through his veins. He was an Uchiha, how could he be so weak? They'd been torturing that IWA genin for 20 minutes to no avail. Naruto shows up and after 20 seconds the boy would have been willing to kill his own grandmother. How could the gap in their levels of power be so ridiculous? Hate me, Sasuke. Only then will you be strong enough to kill me. Unbeknownst to him, crimson color began to bleed into his eyes. He had to get stronger. He needed to be powerful enough to kill the one who had stolen everything from him. If he couldn't even defeat Naruto, how could he hope to defeat Itachi? Abruptly the demon child stopped, an act which caused the startled Uchiha to nearly run into him. Not even bothering to turn around, Naruto spoke, his voice as harsh and as bitter as ice. It appears that you've forgotten about our little chat before the exam, Uchiha. I assure you, the next time you look upon me with those wretched eyes I will not hesitate to tear them from your skull. It only took Sasuke a few seconds to realize that the boy was talking about his Sharingan. His anger flared. How dare that creature insult his eyes, insult his family's eyes. The Sharingan was his most prized possession, it alone was the key to defeating his brother. There was no way, no fucking way, that he would let this monster besmirch the good name of his clan's Kekkei Genkai. The sharp sound of metal screeching on metal drew the boy out of his inner ranting. Naruto was now facing him, talons extended and rage alight in his eyes. Sasuke quickly deactivated his Sharingan. His pride wasn't worth getting killed over. My apologies, Uzumaki-sama. His stomach churned as the honorific slid past his lips. I was unaware that I had activated my Sharingan. I hope that you can forgive me. Naruto responded by slashing his claws across the Uchiha's face. Sasuke cried out and recoiled from the sudden burst of pain, his hand reflexively going up to the injury. The wounds were shallow, but that didn't make them any less painful. 5 bloody gashes ran the length of the boy's face, the one in the middle barely missing his left eye. Kiba pulled out a roll of gauze and moved quickly to bandage the wounds, partially worried about the damage that had been done to his teammate, but even more worried that Sasuke might do something stupid. Naruto retracted his claws, looking at Sasuke with an emotion akin to boredom. You walk the edge of a razor, Uchiha. Falter again and I'll show you just how unforgiving I can be. With Kiba holding the gauze against his face, Sasuke could only nod in understanding. The action seemed to satisfy their psychotic teammate, who proceeded to turn his back on them and continue walking as if nothing had happened. XXXXXX. Upon entering room 78, Team 7 immediately found themselves swarmed by medic neens. Or more specifically, Sasuke and Kiba found themselves swarmed by medic neens, while Naruto, the one who was covered in the most blood, was avoided like the plague. In short order, the wounds on Sasuke's face were mended, as was Kiba's hand, which he'd apparently managed to break after punching Nashi. The pair muttered a few words of thanks before moving off to find a place where they could wait out the rest of the first test. A smirk spread across the Inuzuka's face as he caught sight of a familiar pineapple-headed ninja sleeping on one of the desks. Kiba walked over to the desk and got as close to his friend's face as he could. Hey, Shikamaru! The boy's head jerked up so quickly that he nearly fell out of his chair. Why did all of his friends have to be so troublesome? Kiba snickered. Man, only you would fall asleep during the Chunin exams. How'd a lazy ass like you ever manage to pass the first test? Shikamaru just rolled his eyes before letting his head fall to the desk again. Not 5 seconds had passed before Shikamaru found that a small dog had been placed on his head. He was fully prepared to ignore it and continue to try and get some sleep, but then Kiba said something about a dynamic marking technique and Shikamaru shot out of his chair as if he'd been electrocuted. For his part, Kiba was satisfied with laughing his ass off, mumbling something about how it was better to be pissed off than pissed on. Shikamaru shot his friend a withering look. Only then did it occur to Kiba that it probably wasn't the best idea to have the class genius angry at him. This notion was reinforced when a good amount of killing intent spiked behind him. Kiba slowly turned around. Oh, hi Ino. Hi Kiba. She chirped in an overly friendly voice. You know I have to be around Shikamaru all day, which in and of itself is pretty awful. Thanks. Shikamaru quipped dryly. No problem, Ino replied. But now he smells like pee. Kiba, I don't like the smell of pee, do you? Kiba looked around nervously. No? Ino grabbed the boy and leaned in close. A word of advice, Kiba, don't piss off someone who can make you kiss other boys. The Inuzuka gulped before nodding vigorously. Good. Ino smiled, her mood doing a complete 180. So what did you think of the exam? Kiba blinked a few times at the girl's abrupt change in demeanor but then shrugged it off as a chick thing. It was. The thought of Naruto hurling a steel ball at their prisoner surfaced in his mind. Interesting. The blonde's eyes shifted toward Naruto, who was currently engaged in a staring contest with a very large Kyuubi. Yeah, somehow I can see that. She looked back at Kiba. So what happened? Well, you know how lucky me and Sasuke are. Our prisoner turned out to have some kind of bloodline that made his skin really hard, almost like stone or something. Kiba rubbed the back of his head. I learned that the hard way when I broke my hand on his face. So anyway, kunai and fists are useless on this guy, so Sasuke goes all Sharingan on him. Which turns out to be just about as useful as hitting him because our teacher, the legendary Jiraiya, he mimicked his sensei's voice, doesn't know genjutsu worth shit. Ino rolled her eyes. Having genjutsu as her specialty made her acutely aware of just how lacking her old sensei was in that respect. So at this point we're basically sitting on our hands and waiting for Naruto to show up. Eventually he does and we figure, oh, Naruto's a normal person. He'll just tell us the room that we have to go to. And so... Kiba stopped talking when he realized that Ino was staring at him like he had two heads. The boy sighed, yeah, we're not very bright. Anyway, Naruto claims to have forgotten the room number, and so he beats the shit out of this guy. It wasn't even funny how quick he broke the kid. Ino looked back at Naruto, who had changed partners and was now in a staring contest with a creepy-looking red-haired kid. Boy, did she not envy her old teammates. So how about you? How did you manage to pass the test with those two as your partners? He nodded toward Chuji, who was busy feeding jerky to Akamaru, and Shikamaru, who was sleeping again. After hearing Kiba's story, Ino couldn't help but grin. Actually, I just mind-walked our guy. We were the second ones to get here after that Cloud team. She pointed toward them. I don't think that you should mess with them. Something about that team seems off. Kiba sent her a flat look. Gee, what tipped you off? Could it be that the one with the mohawk has arms that are bigger than my torso? Or maybe it's that guy who has like a dozen swords on his back? Perhaps it's the scary lady who's looking at Akamaru like she wants to eat him? The girl kicked him in the shin. I'm serious, you jerk. Don't mess around with those guys unless you have to. Fine. Kiba growled as he willed away the pain in his leg. You know, for your own good, you should probably just stay away from our team. Naruto isn't going to kill me or Sasuke, but I'm pretty sure that he won't extend the same treatment to you guys. Ino nodded. Yeah, you're probably right. Anyway, did you? She was cut off by the sound of a loud explosion accompanied by a cloud of pink smoke. As the smoke cleared away, a large banner with sparkly letters came into view. It read, The Sexy and Single Mitarashi Anko. Standing underneath the banner was a woman in a brown trench coat and a fishnet bodysuit, probably the sexy and single Mitarashi Anko from the sign. Alright, you little bastards, it's time for round 2. So quit gawking at me and let's go. This part is going to be even harder. A Rain Nin spoke up. Wait, you mean it's starting now? But we didn't even get a chance to rest. Anko made a crying gesture. That's so sad. She whined. I just wish that I gave a fuck. Now get off your asses and move. You've all got a date with Training Ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. XXXXXX. As Naruto continued to stare out into the labyrinth of plant life, he felt his control begin to slip away. There was something about this forest that beckoned to him, something about it that had ensnared his senses. The forest was old, very old, an ancient place full of darkness and anger. The trees didn't even seem to be terrestrial. Giants twisted and gnarled by the cruel hand of time, creatures either too strong or too proud to let themselves wither away. This was his domain. And these creatures, he looked toward the group of genin, they were his prey. Anko stood in front of them on a small, out-of-place tree stump. Before we start the next portion of the exam, I'm legally obligated, she interjected sneer quotes, to tell you that this portion of the exam is very dangerous. We don't call this place the Forest of Death because it sounds good. Even for Chunin, this place is treacherous. If you don't think that you can make it through this forest without dying, then please, quit now and save me the hassle of finding your bodies. No one moved. The Jonin sighed. Of course they would make her life difficult. Okay, But don't say I didn't warn you. She snapped her fingers and over a dozen chunin materialized out of the forest. This portion of the exam is pretty straightforward, she explained as one of the chunin handed her 2 scrolls. This, she held up a green scroll, is an earth scroll, and this, she held up a red scroll, is a heaven scroll. To pass this exam you'll have to acquire both scrolls and reach the tower in the center of this forest within 3 days. The catch is, you will only be given one of these scrolls. In order to get the other scroll you'll have to take it from another team. The chunin began to hand out the scrolls. Though killing is discouraged, this test is no holds barred. Feel free to use any means necessary in order to pass the exam. From somewhere in the crowd she heard a cry of sweet. And then suddenly a grass nin was flying through the air. The Kusa genin hit the ground and didn't even have time to move before his assailant landed on him. Enko only sprung into action when a familiar sound of steel on stone met her ears. She pulled the genin away just as Naruto's claws punched into the earth. She stood there, holding the squirming Kusa nin by his neck, as she looked at Naruto. Let me rephrase that. You can use any means necessary to pass the exam after the exam begins. The Jinchuriki's eyes narrowed in annoyance, and he retracted his claws. How foolish of me. He deadpanned before returning to his place next to his teammates. Enko shook her head in exasperation and dropped the now very blue-faced genin. And now the rules, she announced happily, seeming to completely forget that Naruto had nearly murdered a fellow contestant. First rule, as I've already said, you have to get both scrolls to the tower within 72 hours. If you can't get them within the time limit, you fail. Second rule, only teams that still have all their members combat effective are allowed to pass this phase. If any member of your team is killed or otherwise wounded too badly to continue, you automatically fail. On a side note, if managed to come out of the forest with more teammates, then you went in with you're doing something wrong. Third rule, you have to keep your scrolls in plain view at all times and are not allowed to make counterfeits or destroy any of them. Doing either of these things will result in an automatic failure. Fourth rule, you aren't allowed to open your scrolls. In the field you will sometimes be given messages that contain highly classified information. If you read them you risk your ninja status as well as your life. Naruto grinned. This was going to be a bloodbath. He turned to look at Killer Bee, the Kumo Jinchuriki mimicking his expression. Not yet. Savor the anticipation. He's the one who will give my life purpose. That's all there is to it for this portion of the exam. If there aren't any questions, then we'll begin right away. Chuji raised his hand. What do we do for food? That's an interesting question. Enko stroked her chin in fake thought. Can anyone here tell Fat Ass what he should do for food when he's out in the forest for 3 days? Kankuro piped up almost immediately. Make him eat glass. Rocks. Another genin added. Trees. People. Naruto added hungrily. Punch him in the ass? Enko nodded. Well, that last comment was less than helpful, but I think you get the general idea. So if there aren't any other questions, let's begin. Nobody spoke. Well, in that case, let me give you one last piece of advice. Enko grinned. Don't get yourselves killed. Chapter 16. Snake in the Grass. Apart from the incessant whine of insects, or the occasional screech of an unseen jungle bird, the first 30 minutes of the exam were passed in silence. Tense, abrasive silence. And as Sasuke and Kiba soon discovered, this, regrettably, was to be the high point of the second exam. Around minute 31 the silence was pierced by the sharp reverberating shriek of metal on metal, a sound which the pair now recognized as Naruto extending his claws. Immediately, the two genin were on high alert, bodies tense and eyes peeled for any type of movement. The soft sound of a drawn-out metallic click reached their ears and the duo turned, taking in the sight of their psychotic still-walking teammate slowly retracting his talons. Kiba sent Sasuke a nervous look before he tentatively began to trail after the Jinchuriki. If the Uchiha had been unnerved by Naruto's actions, his face didn't show it. He calmly sheathed his kunai before he too caught up to the boy, silence again descending on the group. Not 2 minutes had passed before Naruto once again extended his claws. Again, Sasuke and Kiba had prepared themselves for battle, and again no attack came. And then, just as before, the demon vessel slowly retracted his claws, the distance between them once again revealing that the boy didn't even break his stride. Sasuke and Kiba shared a puzzled look before once again catching up to their teammate. Soon afterwards the blonde again extended his claws. However, this time neither one of his teammates stopped walking. Perhaps if they didn't react to the noise, Naruto would get tired of playing whatever game that he'd invented and hopefully let them continue the exam in peace. They were sorely disappointed to learn that Naruto was ignoring them completely. For the next hour, the Uchiha and the Inuzuka were forced to endure the nerve-wracking shriek of Naruto's claws. From there it only got worse. The interval between the screeches seemed to be shrinking, and every so often a ripple of red light would flow through the boy's body. Not to mention the fact that Naruto would occasionally turn around, take a good long look at Kiba, and then send him a fawn-filled grin before moving on. Just when the boy's teammates thought that they were going to go insane, Naruto came to an abrupt stop. "We're here." The duo looked around. Wherever here was, it didn't seem like anything special. To them, this place that Naruto had led them to just seemed to be more jungle. There were only a few noticeable differences between this piece of jungle and the jungle that they just trekked through. However, the longer they stayed, clearer it became that this place was not at all what it seemed. The most noticeable of these distinctions had to do with the size and shape of the trees. The trees here were large, much larger than those that ringed the forest's entrance. Which was certainly saying something when one considered that those outer trees could easily dwarf the Hokage's tower. They were old, remarkably so, grand timber monoliths all but mummified by the ancient vines of some long-extinct species of climbing flower. Two relics of a long-dead world forced to either live with one another in symbiosis or perish. The air in this place was damp and thick, saturated with over a millennia's worth of dead pollen and dust. With every breath they took, the pair had forced down a hacking cough, afraid to rupture the perfect silence and transform the Jinchuriki's look of reverence into one of outrage. It was Sasuke who finally spoke. What is this place?" Naruto picked a flower from one of the vines that was strangling the base of a tree. "This is my home," he whispered as he continued to stare at the flower. "This is where I met my king." Both boys tensed. Thanks to Kabuto, they knew all too well of the king of whom Naruto spoke. Kiba took a step forward, trying his best to comfort the whining puppy in his jacket. "I don't understand." He shook his head. "This place is sacred to you. Why would you bring us here?" Naruto spoke in a dangerous tone. "Because I'm absolutely certain that neither of you will tell another living soul about this place." Kiba flinched at the boy's choice of words. The Jinchuriki let the flower in his hand fall to the mossy blanket of the forest floor, watching with mild interest as the vibrant crimson flower crumbled into dust. "There are monsters in this forest, creatures like me who have powers that can destroy you so completely that only your memory will remain. You are fragile, pitiful creatures, and my fate is shackled to that of your own. If you die, then I will be forced to continue living my death. If you live, I will be given a chance to obtain that which is most precious to me. I will be given my existence." The genin blinked at the boy's cryptic monologue but said nothing, not wanting to risk the demon child's anger. He turned to Sasuke. "Give me the scroll, Uchiha." The boy simply nodded and handed him the heaven scroll. Naruto took it from him, and after a few seconds of concentration the scroll evaporated into a cloud of red smoke. Sasuke felt his heart jump in his chest, Enko's words about the penalty for destroying their scroll ringing clearly in his head. He prayed to Kami that Naruto knew what he was doing. A small glowing symbol appeared on the palm of the boy's gloved fist, and a small smirk spread on the boy's face. "The scroll will be safer in my hands than it would have been in yours." His smirk shifted into a scowl. "I trust that you both agree with me?" Both boys gave him a careful nod. Naruto turned to leave. "I will be back by nightfall with food, water, and our second scroll. While I'm away, I strongly advise that you don't do something stupid." Kiba's head shot up. "Wait, you mean that you just want us to wait here until you come back?" Naruto rounded on him, eyes glowing menacingly in the dim, dusty light of the grove. "That isn't a problem, is it?" The Inuzuka took a step back. "And no," he stuttered fearfully. "It's no problem at all." The corners of the Kyuubi container's mouth turned up into a wicked grin. "Good. Oh, and don't touch the flowers." His teammates could only nod mutely as he vanished in a flash of scarlet light. XXXXXX. "Man, this sucks." Saku whined as he riffled through the pockets of a dead rain nin. "If it's this easy to beat the Uchiha's team, I'm gonna be really disappointed." Kin rolled her eyes. "Oh, shut up, Saku. Just be glad that our master chose us to go on this mission instead using us as lab rats for that new seal of his. She's right, you know, Dosa added. If we can capture the Uchiha, then our lord will be very pleased. At least his disappearance won't be investigated very thoroughly. After all, people go missing during these exams all the time. Sokka frowned as he pulled an earth scroll out of the genin's pocket. I still say that this is too easy. Dosa was about to reply when a sudden violent screech of steel on steel echoed through the forest. All three of them were immediately on high alert, eyes darting wildly as they tried to find their hidden opponent. A moment passed and still nothing happened. The bandaged genin turned to his teammates. On me, and stay low. This poor bastard doesn't even know that we're here. Zaku flexed his hands and smirked. Like shooting fish in a barrel. It only took the sound team 2 minutes to find their next target, a fairly unimpressive feat due to the boy's blatant disregard for his surroundings. Crouched down in a bush, the three Otonin shared a look of disbelief at the prospect that someone who claimed to be a ninja could be so oblivious. The boy was walking almost lackadaisically through the forest, his chosen garb of burnt orange and black providing about as much camouflage as a signal flare against the emerald-green vibrance of the vegetation. The boy made no move to remain hidden as continued to meander aimlessly through the forest. It's got to be a trap, Kin realized. Just look at him, no one's that stupid. I'm not too sure about that, Dosa replied as he watched boy plow straight through a bush of poison ivy. This guy might actually be as dumb as he seems. So what do we do? Sokka clipped impatiently. At this range I could turn him into a smear on the ground. Just let me at him. Kin huffed. Don't be such an idiot. That's probably exactly what he wants you to do. In fact, I bet that this kid is a clone. If you shoot him it'll give away our position, then his team will spring the trap. I don't think so, Dosa replied. A clone jutsu doesn't have a physical body, so if that was clone it wouldn't be able to keep kicking that rock. Yeah, but... Ah, screw that noise, Sokka interrupted. This kid is dead. The sound nin jumped out of the bush and took aim on the boy's head. Hey dumbass, he called out. The boy turned around. Sokka couldn't help but shake his head. Of course he would turn around. The boy's eyes grew comically wide before he whipped around and began to run. Sokka just laughed. Wind release, sonic air slice jutsu. The air in front of him condensed into a percussive wave and shot forward, shredding the landscape. A pitiful scream was wrenched from the boy's lips as the column of air punched a fist-sized hole through his back and flung his body to the ground. However, Sokka's look of triumph quickly transformed into one of horror as he watched the boy's tattered body melt into a cloud of smoke. Oh fuck me, it was a clone. Ambush. Take defensive positions, guys. Dosu and Kin jumped out of bush and began to run towards Zaku. I told you it was a trap, you stupid bastard, Kin yelled. But no. You had to go and... The girl's words became a gurgling scream, and hot blood showered down onto Dosa's back. Dosa! Get down! His teammate roared. The boy did so, hurling himself to the ground in order to give Zaku a clean shot. Otonin's eyes went wide when he got a clear view of what he was fighting. The clueless boy from before was staring back at him. Eyes alight with twisted glee, continued to strip the flesh from Kin's body with his fangs. Sonic air slice jutsu. The attack met with nothing but open air, his target blurring out of sight mere seconds before the wave impacted. Zaku felt a bead of sweat run down his face. Fuck. Come on, Dosu, get moving! Dosu scrambled to his feet only to be rewarded by hammer-like fist connecting with his head. The boy became dimly aware that he was on the ground again, pinned to the forest floor by something sharp lodged in his back. Suddenly, horrible pain shot through his right arm. And then he knew no more. Zaku watched in horror as the boy wrenched Dosa's arm from his torso with a sickening crack, relieving him of his weapon and his limb. The boy swung Dosa's arm like a hammer, cackling manically as the heavy metal gauntlet crushed the boy's head into jelly. Even though it was obvious that the sound nin was dead after the first blow, the boy continued to crush his teammate's broken body, laughing louder and louder as every impact sprayed his body with gore and gray matter. The sole remaining sound nin felt Bao begin to rise in his throat, and tears began to form in his eyes. This was it. He was going to die. The boy's foot struck his gut with the force of a reeking ball, emptying its contents onto the ground. Zaku didn't even have time to reach the ground before agonizing pain again racked his body. His eyes drifted to the spot where his arm used to be before slowly moving up and meeting his killer's gaze. Naruto bared his fangs in a bloody grin as he trained the boy's severed arm on his head. "Guess what elemental affinity I have?" the Jinchuriki taunted in a sing-song manner. "You know, from this range I can probably turn you into a smear on the ground. Let's find out if I'm right." Wind release. Great Maelstrom Cannon Jutsu. The jutsu exploded out of Zaku's severed arm with a thunderous bang, utterly annihilating everything that stood before it. With ravenous hunger, the advancing wall of wind devoured everything that it touched, leaving behind naught but a fine powder not even fit to call itself dust. In short, Naruto's jutsu flattened everything in front of him for almost a mile. The boy let go of the puddle of tissue that was once Zaku's arm and proudly surveyed the destruction he'd wrought. "As worthless and pretentious as you humans are, I'm loath to admit that things would be very dull without idiots like you to keep me amused." Naruto took another look at the expanse of flattened earth in front of him, and his smile slowly morphed into a scowl. "And now I have to find a new scroll because everything I touch turns into shit. XXXXXX. Atop Kiba's head, Akamaru let out long yawn. "Yeah, I know how you feel, buddy." The Inuzuka drawled boredly before letting out a yawn of his own. "This sucks pretty bad." Sasuke scoffed. "Some ninja you are." "Oh, bite me, you stuck-up bastard," Kiba retorted. "If you're so great, then why did Naruto leave you behind?" The Uchiha scowled. "Because he's a selfish monster with more pride than skill. All he cares about is stroking his ego." An amused look crossed Kiba's face. "That second part is true enough, but I'm not so sure about that first bit. He seems to be pretty strong to me. Right now maybe, but in a few years I'll be more than a match for that monster." He smirked. "After all, I have the power of the Sharingan." "Oh right. I completely forgot about your super powerful Kekkei Genkai. How's life going for the elite Uchiha clan again?" "Oh yeah, I remember now. They're all dead." Kiba decided not to voice his personal opinion regarding the power of the Uchiha clan, which was probably for the best due to the fact that Sasuke could still beat his ass in a fight. "You're going to need a lot more than your fancy bloodline if you want to beat Naruto." Kiba looked at the sky. "Who will be returning shortly with our ticket out of this hellhole?" The Sharingan wielder gave a derisive laugh. "You sure seem to be dependent on that monster." "And you sure seem to be oblivious of him," Kiba shot back. "Don't you remember what Jiraiya-sensei said about Naruto? Even he couldn't beat Naruto, and he's a fucking Sannin. If you want to go and get yourself killed, then fine, but don't drag me and Akamaru down with you." Sasuke's eyes narrowed dangerously before suddenly going wide. He launched forward, Sharingan ablaze, barely managing to snake his way through the rain of kunai that he now found streaking towards him. Kiba realized what was happening almost instantly, and took hold of his teammate, pulling him to safety behind the rock that he was previously sitting on. "Flush him out," the Inuzuka whispered. "With your reflexes you'll be able to last out there longer than me." Sasuke nodded, and after taking a calming breath, launched himself back into the fray. Kiba pulled Akamaru out of his coat. "Let's do this, Akamaru." The puppy gave a yip of agreement. The Inuzuka ran through some hand seals. Ninja art, beast human clone jutsu. The form of Akamaru disappeared inside a cloud of smoke, which blew away to reveal a second Kiba. Ninja art, all fours jutsu. With his senses heightened by his jutsu, it was all too easy to find their hidden assailant. The canine duo shot out from behind their cover, swinging wide and then converging on their tree-born opponent from both sides. The grass nin seemed to be totally engrossed with her task of turning Sasuke into a pincushion, seeming to not even notice the pair of Kibas until they were right on top of her. Kiba's claws flashed towards the woman but struck nothing except for open air. Akamaru's attack met with similar failure, as the Kusa-nin twisted around the blow with an eerie serpentine grace. The woman came out of her dodge and struck, twisting her body at an unnatural angle that allowed her to deliver a bone-jarring kick to Kiba's chest. Momentarily stunned by the ferocity of the woman's attack, Kiba was unable to parry the vicious storm of punches that met with his body. The boy was granted a brief reprieve from the assault as the Kusa-nin was forced to evade an attack from Akamaru. However, just as before, the woman uncoiled from her dodge and struck, hammering the Kiba clone with so many kicks that her leg became little more than a blur. One final kick knocked Akamaru out of his transformation and sent the small dog rocketing towards the forest floor. Kiba snapped into action, his efforts fueled by his concern for his lifelong friend. In the end, the Inuzuka's motives proved meaningless. Every swing of his claws was deflected perfectly before being countered by brutal kick to his head or chest. After one particularly sloppy attack, it became apparent that the woman had grown tired of pummeling the boy. She took hold of his arm and yanked hard, twisting her body as she went. Kiba cried out in pain as shoulder was jerked out of its socket, but a series of violent chops to his neck quickly silenced his cries. The woman smirked and simply let go of the boy's body, watching in amusement as Kiba plummeted back to earth. However, a few seconds before the boy's body would have hit the ground, his teammate caught him, an action that saved him from almost certain death. The grass Nin frowned before leaping out of the tree to face the uninjured member of Team 7. Sasuke's Sharingan spun furiously as he continued to look down at the bloody body that he still had clutched in his arms. He set Kiba down next to the battered form of Akamaru. "You!" he spat, a slight tremor of rage coming into his voice. "I'm going to make you pay for what you did to him." The grass Nin chuckled darkly. "You're certainly welcome to try," she hissed. Sasuke drew a kunai and lunged for the woman's throat, murderous intent gleaming in his crimson eyes. She moved much faster than he'd expected, deftly catching his wrist and then slamming her fist across his face. The Uchiha swung out blindly with the blade in his free hand, the action doing little more than providing another opening for the woman to strike at. Pain flooded through his body as the woman's fist smashed into his unprotected ribs, breaking a few, more likely than not. The Kusanin gave the boy no chance to recover. Her foot connected with the Uchiha's knee, an act which sent him sprawling to the ground. Taking advantage of their new position, the woman smashed her knee against Sasuke's jaw. After that, the Sharingan wielder could do little more that fight to remain conscious. The woman pulled Sasuke towards her. "It seems like I win, Sasuke-kun," she mocked smugly. "And now I think I'll claim my prize." Without warning, the woman bit down on Sasuke's neck, wrenching a tortured scream from the genin's mouth. Only then did she let him fall to the ground, her eyes glimmering darkly as she watched a seal begin to form on the boy's neck. Now that was over, she could focus on ridding this world of the other boy. She opened her mouth and withdrew the legendary sword Kusanagi from the maw of the serpent that resided within her. The woman leveled her blade on Kiba's throat, silently commending the boy for lasting as long as he did. An ear-splitting bang reverberated off the trees and the woman suddenly found her hand had been sheared off at the wrist, the Kusanagi spiraling off into the darkness of the forest. A kick with enough strength behind it to crush steel connected with the woman's head, nearly ripping her skull away from her spinal column. She flew the air at amazing speeds, skipping off various obstacles in her path and only coming to a stop when an iron-like hand clamped down around her face. "What have you done to me, Viper Prince?" Even if Orochimaru had wanted to answer, he wouldn't have been able to. Naruto's hand was latched onto his face much too tightly. The Jinchuriki wrenched the snake Sanin's head back before viciously smashing it against the trunk of a nearby tree. For the first time in a very long while, Orochimaru felt pain. Naruto was relentless. He slammed the man's head into the tree over and over again, not willing to be pacified until the serpent wielder's skull was nothing more than a bloody stain on its bark. "You've stolen my purpose from me. You've taken away my death," the demon vessel roared. Naruto struck, his arm moving so fast that it seemed to fade out of existence. His talons tore into Orochimaru's body, his blows connecting with such speed that his claws didn't cut, they liquefied. Trapped against the blood-stained bark of the tree, the only thing that the snake Sannin could do was to will his blade back to him. The blonde was so infatuated with his destruction of the serpent wielder that he didn't even realize that the Kusanagi had returned to its master's hand. In fact, Naruto didn't even seem to notice the blade even after it had sliced through his arms. Without even flinching, the Jinchuriki's jaws came crashing down on the Sannin's neck like a nail-filled vice. Orochimaru screamed in pain as the demon container began to thrash his head from side to side, fully intent on ripping out his opponent's throat. The snake Sannin struck again, this time using the Kusanagi to chop through the demon child's neck. Naruto's body fell to the ground with Orochimaru's following suit shortly thereafter. The serpent wielder pulled himself to his feet and let out a few jagged, raspy breaths. When he'd come into this forest, he'd hoped that he would be able to avoid confrontation with the Leaf Village's pet demon. It seems that luck wasn't on his side. An explosion of crimson light had the Sannin instantly on high alert. Orochimaru watched with no small amount of horror as Naruto's body began to reconstruct itself. Why? The five-tailed Naruto raged. Why can't you kill me? The snake Sannin's eyes went wide when he realized that Naruto had rammed his chakra-infused talons into his chest. His sword was wrest from his grip, and the next thing he knew, the razor-sharp blade of the Kusanagi had been brought down on the juncture of his ragged neck, the blade all but slicing him in half. Naruto reared back his head, unleashed a primal roar to the heavens, able to do nothing else to extinguish his rage. And Naruto. A choking rasp sounded from behind him. The boy turned, almost unwilling to believe what he saw. Kiba Inuzuka, broken and bloody, stumbled towards him with Sasuke slung over his shoulder. Please. Help. The boy's strength gave out, and he fell to the ground. Naruto's gaze lingered on the wrecked forms of his teammates for a few more seconds before his eyes darted back to Orochimaru. The snake Sannin wove the final sign, and his form was swallowed by that of a summoned python. It vanished as quickly as it had come, taking its master with it. Naruto let his five-tailed cloak die out and began to move through the forest at lightning-fast speeds. If he moved quickly enough, and if Kami was smiling upon him, he just might be able to save the lives of his fallen teammates and salvage his reason to live. Chapter 18: The Lantern Bearer. His world was cold and black. It was a strange world devoid of light and feeling, of perception or purpose. Devoid of space or time or any point of reference, this was the world in which he lived in now. Lived? Was this living? He didn't think that it was. No, he couldn't possibly still be alive after the beating he took from that Grassnin, could he? After the way she chopped his neck with that iron-like hand so many times, he was scarcely able to breathe. Blood more often than air was what found its way into his lungs, and his head had burned and throbbed from the numerous blows that it had been subjected to. It had hurt so bad. Pain sparked and danced within his skull, almost as if a hive full of angry bees had been dropped inside. Surely this world was a more pleasant alternative. Right? He couldn't tell anymore. His whole body felt as though it were sinking through something, oil or tar or some other inky fluid that robbed him of his sight and smothered him in its icy embrace. The frigid, slippery nothingness slithered its way into his being and pooled there, leaving him numb, mind, body, and soul. Everything was so surreal and alien. In this world nothing seemed to exist. No up, no down, no light or dark, no matter. Not even he existed. But he did, sort of. It all seemed to make sense to him. It was like that feeling you'd get when you're dreaming. You know things that you couldn't possibly know, and things just simply are, or aren't in this case, and that's how the world works. For example, he was aware of a candle behind him. The candle was small and bore atop its wick a crown of flame. The flame was small, pitiful some would say, but it shone unproudly and defiantly in the morass of the ebon darkness. Somehow he knew that the flame was him. It was his soul, his identity, his very being. It was all things him. And it was dying. Though he could not see it, he could tell that the darkness was closing in on it, crushing it, suffocating it, consuming it. It made him feel very sad, at least he thought he felt sad. He didn't want to see that little flame disappear. He wanted to run over and protect the flame, to stand between it and the darkness, but he knew that he couldn't. He didn't even exist in this world. Though, it soon became apparent that somebody else did. A pity, isn't it? A phantom voice mused. To watch as that tiny spark you hold so dear vanishes right in front of you, it must be. He could almost hear the grin behind the voice widen. Agony. Its very nature filled him with a strange sense of mounting dread, as though the mere act of listening to its words would allow this being to coax out some sort hidden darkness that was locked deep within his soul. He hated it. It was inherently wrong. On a fundamental level, some part of him knew that this voice was something that wasn't supposed to exist. The words that it spoke were treachery itself, and yet the voice sounded so good to his senses, he couldn't bring himself to ignore it. Like chains swathed in black velvet, the words bound him, shackled him, dominated him until he could do little more than revel in their sound. He felt more than he saw the burning crimson light that leisurely snaked its way out of the darkness. It was bright, impossibly bright, and yet somehow this light left him feeling as though he'd been plunged into an expanse of water, cold and dark, that pressed in on him from all sides, slowly drowning him as he sank into its depths. However, all of these feelings paled in comparison when the one who was bearing the lantern-bearer that trailed out of the void after this eerie red light. It was the demon child Uzumaki Naruto who melted out from the shadows. But somehow it wasn't him. Something about him was off, that is to say more off than usual. It was almost as if all of the boy's hatred, darkness, and bloodlust were consolidated into this one being, almost as if he was his raw demonic feelings with no human soul to balance them. It was Uzumaki Naruto, that much was certain, but he was different. Horribly different. He was older now, a man probably closer to 20 years of age instead of a boy of nearly 13, and he was clothed in gentleman's finery. A long black coat, its length branded by strange ruby symbols that seemed to move on their own in the lantern light, was draped over his shoulders and fastened in front by a neat array of silver buttons. Elaborate jeweled earrings adorned his now long and pointed ears, and each one of his fingers bore a gaudy platinum ring studded with rubies. His normally unkempt shoulder-length blonde hair was neatly combed and pulled back into a small ponytail. The fingerless gloves that were always present on his hands were instead replaced by gloves of fine black silk, and from out of them curved the man's cruel knife-like talons. But for all these differences, the wicked smile that graced the man's face was identical to the one worn by his childhood counterpart. But he was not captivated by the intruder's physical appearance. In fact, he had hardly even registered the dramatic change. No, what stood out to him the most was the hellish lantern that his unwanted guest was carrying. It was a simple thing. Wrought of pitch-black iron, it took the appearance of a fanged and grinning skull. Strange symbols of the same type that decorated the devil man's coat were scrawled across the forehead of the skull. Somehow he knew that in the tongue of men they read no future. And within the toothy maw of the skull that horrid, blindingly bright, scarlet flame danced and writhed. "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you, Inuzuka Kiba?" The Jinchuriki spoke, his eyes glittering with fiendish delight. "Shall I help you?" He wanted to scream and oh, at the top of his lungs, but he couldn't. He didn't exist. He could only watch in horror as the man walked closer and closer to the nearly extinguished candle. Naruto gave a small, barely audible laugh as he reached the candle, and raised a single talon to the mouth of the lantern that he carried. The nightmarish light responded immediately to the gesture and leapt to the appendage, bathing the tip of its master's claw in it unholy light. "I don't presume to apologize for this, Inuzuka Kiba," the demon vessel commented disinterestedly. "That would imply that I see you as an equal instead of as a pawn," he continued as he applied the lantern's flame to his claw, rotating it every once in a while to make sure that he kept the heat uniform. "But just so you know, your life will likely end early because of this." Naruto removed his claw from the lantern and brought before his eyes, watching with sadistic excitement as ruby-hued sparks leapt from the now glowing blade-like appendage. "And what a life you will lead!" He grinned savagely as he pressed the claw to the wick of the candle. Inuzuka Kiba awoke with a gasp as he shot up to a sitting position from his bed of moss. His reward for this action was pain. Blinding, mind-numbing pain. And it seemed that the pain had brought along friends, vertigo, and nausea. The dog Nin immediately fell back the ground, and proceeded to empty his stomach contents onto the ground beside him. "You know," a voice to his right drawled, "I was almost certain that that was going to make you explode." "'Tis a shame, really," the voice sighed, "it seems like my anti-peasant aura just isn't what it used to be." The Inuzuka coughed again before groggily rolling over to address the owner of the voice of the person whom he never wanted to see again. "What?" he croaked dryly before a coughing fit racked his body. Naruto's eyes widened only slightly, but the light that danced within those orbs began to twinkle dangerously. "Oh, how I hate that question. Inuzuka, do you remember what I did to the last person who asked me that question?" the demon container inquired innocently. The image of his blonde teammate hurling one of those steel balls at Nashi's head and purposefully missing it by scant centimeters filled the boy's mind. He gave a small grunt of affirmation before returning to his previous task. "Don't make me do it to you. It would make this whole undertaking of mine very pointless indeed." After taking a few deep breaths, the dog Nin rubbed his throbbing head. "Man, what did you do to me?" The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki tilted his head in mock confusion. "Why, I brought you back to life, young Inuzuka. Though I suppose if you're not enjoying yourself I could always send you back." Kiba's eyes grew wide and a myriad of thoughts began to race through his head. How can he bring me back to life? There's no way he has that kind of power. No one has that kind of power no matter how strong of a ninja they are, right? I mean, he is a Jinchuriki after all, and not only that, he's the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, so that's gotta count for something. Arg, but he's probably lying to me just to fuck with my head. Sadistic monster like him, this is exactly like something he'd do, trick me into thinking that he can bring people back from the dead. Kiba's inner monologue stopped dead when his weary brain suddenly realized something. I died. The Inuzuka shrieked incredulously as he once again sprung up to a sitting position. The demon looked at Kiba pointedly for a few seconds before cleaning out his ear with his pinky. I'm sorry. I must have misheard you. You did say, thank you for saving my filthy human life, Uzumaki-sama. Did you not? The boy's eyes promised death. It would be so terribly gauche of you to do otherwise. Wouldn't you agree? The Inuzuka somehow managed to go even paler than he already was. Why yes, Uzumaki-sama. Of course. Thank you for saving me. He quickly blurted out. The Jinchuriki adopted a broad grin. Good. He purred. I do so enjoy when people are polite. Makes the world seem a little less. His grin split his face monstrous. Kiba did his best to hide the shiver of fear that ran through his body, and his eyes once again went wide as he fully remembered all that had happened. Is Akamaru okay? He asked frantically as he began looking around for his small companion. What about Sasuke? Where is he? Is he okay? The jailer of the Nine Tails simply chuckled darkly at the other boy's questions. I've tucked the Uchiha somewhere he won't get lost or stepped on. His injuries are healing nicely thanks to the little parting gift that your opponent left to him. Kiba furrowed his brow in question at that last statement, but he knew well enough to not interrupt the volatile blonde while he was speaking. Your little dog, on the other hand. The Jinchuriki trailed off and nodded to a tree behind him. Let's just say you will need to move quickly if you wish to save him. At that, Kiba was on his feet and running toward his companion, hardly even noticing the pain that his numerous broken bones were inflicting upon him. Behind him he missed the feral grin that Naruto was wearing as he watched the dog Nin rush to aid of his furry comrade. Such a durable little thing you are, Inuzuka Kiba. I suspect you will be a most amusing toy for me to try and break. Kiba found the puppy crumpled up at the base of the tree. He was unconscious and breathing haggardly. It was no surprise really, considering the distance that the small dog had fallen. From the way his chest was rising and falling, the boy could tell that his left lung had collapsed, and scores of tiny cuts peppered the small dog's body, mating his once white fur with blood. The Inuzuka gingerly picked up the puppy and cradled him in his arms, tears of rage welling up in the corners of his eyes. That Kusa bitch would pay for what she did to Akamaru. The sound of footsteps approaching him from behind drew Kiba's attention. He's held on like that for an hour. Naruto commented disinterestedly. I really couldn't say if he's going to make it or not. Kiba spun around and looked at the amused demon boy with murder in his eyes. Why haven't you helped him? The dog Nin spat. He's dying and you can save him just like you saved me. The Inuzuka's composure broke and tears began to run down his face. Please, don't let Akamaru die. He's precious to me. I know he doesn't mean anything to you, but he means everything to me. Please, Uzumaki-sama. Please. Naruto's amused grin faded from his face, and for a long time he stood silent. For a few seconds Kiba was terrified that he'd overstepped his bounds and that Naruto would simply wait and watch as the small dog died in his arms. The demon child moved toward the ivy-entombed tree and plucked a white and blue-petaled flower from one of the vines. Do you know what this is, Inuzuka? The boy in question looked confused for a short second before shaking his head no. It is called Berserker Rithos in my tongue. Naruto slowly twirled the flower between his fingers. In yours it is called Firefly Catcher. It is an ancient flower, long extinct if you were to look any place other than here. It has a very special property. Can you guess what that property is, Inuzuka? Kiba was beginning to get impatient, but since he really had no choice other than to play along with the Jinchuriki, he again shook his head. Naruto smirked and the flower in his hand exploded with light, a dancing, careening, and colliding display of vermilion brilliance that made the trees seem as though they were on fire. Shortly thereafter all of the flowers on the tree began to emit the same vibrant crimson light, and a soft humming sound filled the air. They are able to conduct and transmit the flow of chakra. The blonde finished. The other boy could do little except gaze in awe at the burning spire of garnet light that now cloaked the tree. I used this property to place an infinitesimal spark of my chakra within you. It was my ability to heal saved you from death. Naruto let the flower in his hand fall to the ground, and just like that the darkness of night swept back into the forest. The only light was the eerie red glow that shone from the Jinchuriki's eyes. Certainly you understand now. This is the greatest gift that I can give. It is my power, my very soul that now dwells within you. Naruto's eyes seethed with anger. I have already bestowed this gift upon a worthless dog, and I will not do so again. Despite the fury that grew within Kiba's heart at those words, the boy took a step back from the visibly furious demon child. It is necessary for me to keep you alive. You are a means to an end, a tool that will allow me fight the one who will give my life meaning. The boy's crimson eyes flashed with rage. But you are nothing else. A single tail began to materialize behind the boy. Do not make me regret my decision, Inuzuka Kiba. I promise you it will be the last thing you do. And with that the boy let his chakra die out. For a long while either boy spoke. Kiba continued to cradle his dying friend in his arms and Naruto continued to stare burning holes in him. Then the Inuzuka broke the silence. You said you had a pack. That wasn't a lie, was it? Naruto's eyes widened at that statement. That day at the training ground when you introduced yourself to us you said you had a pack. Then you understand the pain that you'd feel if you lost a member of that pack. The Jinchuriki's gaze faltered only for a second before returning Kiba's stare. Akamaru is part of my pack and I'm a part of yours. That's what it means to be on a ninja team. You wouldn't leave a packmate to die, would you? The demon boy's anger returned renewed fervor. A maelstrom of crimson light exploded from his body and lightning arced and snaked wildly into the treetops. Once again the trees were set alight with his power. Do I look like a ninja to you, Inuzuka? The Jinchuriki roared at the other boy who was now curled around Akamaru. 5 flaming tails swept menacingly across the ground behind Naruto. I care nothing for you humans and your petty ideals. You are not, and you will never be, my equal, and I will not treat you as such. The boy reached out his hand and a brilliant ball of ruby light began to coalesce in his palm. I should end your miserable life for even entertaining such a notion. Kiba did nothing. He simply stayed curled around his companion in hopes that it would do something to protect him against the boy's rage. Naruto stared at the scene before him for a few moments before slowly lowering his hand and allowing the chakra to die out. You are right though. The crimson-eyed boy conceded. Kiba's eyes widened in a mixture of shock and relief. He slowly began to uncurl from around his injured companion but was careful not to meet the other boy's gaze. It might have been just be enough of an insult for the Jinchuriki to take back his words. From the very moment that I gifted you with a second life it was decided. We are bound now by the same fate. Naruto hesitated for a moment. And it would be wrong of me to question the judgment of our king. The dog Nin scarcely dared to breathe. He was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it didn't. Arise, Inuzuka Kiba, and place your wounded comrade on the ground. Once, the blonde grit his teeth. And only this once, I will honor your request. Still avoiding Naruto's gaze, the young Inuzuka slowly got to his feet. He was hesitant to place the defenseless Akamaru back on the ground in front of perhaps the most dangerous being in all of the elemental lands. Images of the sadistic Jinchuriki crushing the small dog beneath his foot for his own sick amusement danced through Genin's mind. He looked down to the bundle of fur cradled in his arms. He could hear his friend's heartbeat beginning to slow, and see how much trouble he was having when he tried to breathe. In a few minutes it wasn't going to matter if Naruto killed Akamaru or not. Kiba felt like he was going to be sick. Look at me, Inuzuka. The demon child commanded. Kiba did so reluctantly. I swear upon my honor that I will do no harm to your friend. Both you and he. The boy then rolled his eyes toward a large tree barely visible in the darkness behind them. And the Uchiha will leave this forest alive. As much as he hated it, the brown-haired genin had little choice other than to trust the word of the monster that stood before him. Hesitantly he lowered the battered dog to the ground and took a step backward. The only thing he could do was hope that Naruto kept his word. The telltale screech of metal on metal echoed throughout the forest as the blonde Jinchuriki's talons sprung forth from his fingers. Kiba stiffened. For a terrible moment he feared that all of his macabre predictions were about to come true. However, when his demonic teammate proceeded to neatly clip one of the blue and white blossoms from the web of ivy at his back, his posture relaxed. Why, Inuzuka, It's almost as if you don't trust me. The demon child chided sarcastically as he knelt before the small dog. I hope I haven't done anything in the past to make you feel that I'm untrustworthy, said the trickster king to the wolf. Kyuubi mused in a far-off tone. Though the other boy could not see it, those words brought a mad grin to the demon vessel's face. The phrase that the genin had quoted was a line from out of a tale, a long-forgotten legend, that the king of demons would whisper to him before he slept when he was young. It would seem like the young Inuzuka was going to become far more interesting in the coming months. After all, who truly knows what the soul of a demon does to the mind of a human? A ripple of energy rolled outward from the kneeling Jinchuriki. It was faint, barely enough to cause the grass around him to bend, but in the darkness small embers of vermilion light gradually flickered into being. They twinkled and flashed and fluttered through the night air, weaving an intricate crimson veil around the boy, all the while emitting a low hypnotic drone. They were almost like fireflies. Kyuubi watched in breathless awe as the scene played out before him. Naruto was evil. Actually, as far as the Inuzuka was concerned, he was literally evil. The boy was the physical embodiment of all things that were wrong and wrenched and wicked and horrible in this world. He brought woe and ruin to everything that beheld him, and left little more than ash and blasted earth in his wake. Plants withered and died when faced with his scathing presence, and animals fled from him as though the hounds of hell were snapping at their heels. The world itself rejected him, and the devil himself wouldn't hesitate to call him scum. He'd borne witness to the boy's monstrous cruelty firsthand. He'd watched as Naruto tortured a genin, a young boy whose only crime was wanting to be a better ninja, just for the sick thrill of it. He'd visited his mother in the hospital after the demon child had nearly run her through just for trying to protect her child. He could build a library out of the number of horror stories he'd overheard regarding the boy's vile exploits. So why now did he look so human? The tiny ruby starbursts pooled within the flower's petals like dew, and the blossom began to thrum with chakra. Soon the bloom was entirely engulfed in light, and Naruto lowered the radiant globe before letting it fall onto the broken body of Akamaru. With a resounding bang, the flower exploded into a cacophony of crimson light. The light disappeared just as suddenly as it had come, and when it was gone, Kyuubi was left trembling in the darkness. Within that flash, for just the slightest whisper in time, the Leaf-Nin could have sworn that he saw the man from his nightmare crouching over Akamaru's body in Naruto's place. The flower was likewise gone, its place having been taken by the man's sinister lantern. No future. Those words haunted him. Naruto stood up abruptly, snapping the Inuzuka out of his thoughts. You will carry him. The blonde snapped as he nodded to the still unmoving form of Kyuubi's friend. I have dallied in this forest far too long for my liking, and we are leaving now. The other boy quickly gathered the puppy into his arms, relieved that his companion was breathing normally again, and began to trail after Naruto, who had already begun to march at a brisk pace off into the darkness. The loud crack of timber being split reverberated throughout the clearing, and the Inuzuka struggled to keep a straight face as the unconscious form of Sasuke Uchiha tumbled unceremoniously out of the tree. To see his proud teammate sprawled awkwardly on the ground like a sack of flour was certainly going to be rare occurrence. He made a note to tell the other boy about this later. Pick that up, the demon container ordered, speaking the word as though he were talking about a piece of trash. Again Kyuubi did so, hoisting his unconscious teammate onto his back before the other boy had a chance to do something drastic. The duo began to walk in silence through the forest. While carrying the unconscious Uchiha, he couldn't help but notice how light the other boy was. Either the Sharingan wielder was watching his figure, or the Inuzuka was getting stronger. He liked to think that it was the latter. Suddenly, his other teammate decided to break their unspoken vow of silence. Oh, I just remembered, I have a present for you, Inuzuka. Kyuubi's eye twitched. Whatever it was, the boy was almost certain that he wasn't going to like this. He hated when he was right. In front of him, the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki absently tossed a scroll over his shoulder. The dog Nin caught it, and was surprised to see that it was the Earth Scroll that his teammate had collected when he left earlier that day. He immediately took note of the strange scent that accompanied it. It smelled weird to him, like he was missing something that was right in front of his face. I really should be thanking your dog, actually. The boy continued as a cruel smile began to spread across his face. His scent is very unique. It was quite clever of you to place it on your friend before the second exam started. Kyuubi could all but hear the Jinchuriki's crazed laughter in his voice. I didn't think you could be so. His eyes glinted dangerously. Treacherous. The genin stopped dead, rooted to the spot with dread. Now that he was thinking about it, he could finally place the familiar scent that accompanied the scroll. Ino. He breathed. Your little blonde friend sends her regards. Naruto threw over his shoulder as he continued to walk forward before being swallowed up by darkness. Chapter 19, of Swords and Sunsets. When those who are weak stand united, they become strong. When those who are strong venture alone, they invite disaster. This is the 24th rule of shinobi conduct. There were very few things in the ninja world as valuable as one's teammates. They were a second set of eyes that could track your enemies, a second set of ears that could foil an impending ambush, and a second pair of hands to wield a blade. But by far the most important thing that a ninja's teammates could be was a tourniquet. A second chance after you've royally fucked up. A squad could cover for the momentary weakness of one member, or, if worse came to worse, and it almost always did, they could drag your sorry shuriken-riddled ass off to a medic before you bled out. At some point you would make a critical mistake. A tripped wire would fail to get noticed, or a kunai would get jammed in an opponent's chest in the thick of battle, and then that was it. You were effectively a ghost whose death just hadn't quite caught up to them yet. Unless, of course, you had your squad to back you up. Out of the 54 active jonin that were stationed in Konoha, not one of them was able to proclaim that they'd never been downed in combat. Sarutobi Asuma was the man who currently had the best track record with regard to how many times that he'd been incapacitated in the field. 4 times the bearded jonin had been brought to the edge of death, and 4 times the only reason that he was able to cling to life was because of the quick actions of his team. He counted himself lucky. Most of the others had their figures up in the double digits. Even Orochimaru, whose treachery was legendary, didn't venture off on missions alone. Though, as he was learning quite painfully now, those teammates didn't do him very much good when they weren't readily available. After the thrashing that Konoha's pet monster had given him, he was seriously beginning to question how badly he really wanted the Sharingan. Of course, he'd been prepared to engage the demon child if things had absolutely required it. In fact, he'd been resigned to the eventuality that he would have to face the boy in combat. What he hadn't been expecting was that the gaping wound that he'd sustained from Boy's jaws would persist even after he abandoned his previous form. Under normal circumstances, by discarding his ruined body, much like the way a snake sheds its skin, he would effectively heal all damage that had been inflicted on him. Apparently these circumstances were anything but normal. Not long after he'd rejuvenated himself, the snake wielder had been brought to his knees by an excruciating pain in his neck. It felt like the Kyuubi vessel had once again delivered that punishing bite to the juncture of his neck. The Sannin could only watch in fascinated horror as the flesh of his neck began to melt away like wax before a flame. If he'd had to guess, it probably had something to do with the amount of demonic chakra that had been introduced into his body when the boy bit him, but it was really a moot point now. Without aid, he would certainly bleed to death. It had been about 5 minutes since he'd sent a messenger viper to retrieve Kabuto, and by now the snake nin's clothing was drenched with blood. Had he been anyone else, he would have been dead long ago. However, even one of the legendary Sannin couldn't live long with their neck torn open as badly as his was. Already he was beginning to feel faint. And so, propped up against the base of a tree, Orochimaru could do little except wait for the Mednin to show up. It was a shame, really. He'd had his hopes set on the Uchiha being his new vessel. Not only that, Kabuto was a good minion. He would prove difficult to replace. That is, if he ever showed up. Attend me, Kabuto, you fool. He rasped sharply, his serpentine eyes beginning to dance with rage. The look was soon replaced by one of dread as the forest around him was filled with the sound of barking laughter. Horrible, familiar laughter. You mean that four-eyed faggot? His stupid ass is long dead, fucked off to meet Jashin-sama. Red clouds. That was what billowed out of the darkness to meet the Sannin. The immortal team, Kakuzu and Haiden, his old associates, entered the clearing. I've got something for ya, you filthy snake cunt. The scythe-toting Nuke-nin spat before tossing an object in front of the visibly shaken Orochimaru. It was Kabuto's head. More accurately, it was Kabuto's head with its mouth stuffed full of Kabuto's genitals. Oh goody. Enough of this prattle, Haiden. The waterfall Jonin reprimanded. Our orders are to keep watch over Orochimaru, and wait for the rest to gather. You're breaking my concentration, and if he escapes, it's on your head. The man's foul-mouthed partner rolled his eyes. "Ma, and go fuck yourself. Your uptight ass has been riding me all day. Look at him." Hayden jabbed his scythe in the snake Neen's direction. Fucker couldn't outrun shit if it gave him a head start. "Oh, Hayden!" A smug sing-song voice called out from somewhere in the shadowy canopy of the forest. "You better not let Leader-sama catch you back sassing your superior, yeah? Remember what he did to Kisame and Itachi? I might just cry if he replaced you." The silver-haired Nuke Neen grit his teeth at the verbal jab. "Go eat a dick, Daidarachan, you ladyboy bitch!" he yelled back into the darkness. The only response that the sadistic Scythewilder received from his agitator was arrogant laughter, and Hayden seethed at the provocation. Able to do little more than watch as his own personal hell unfolded around him, the Sannin groggily swung his head to watch as the group's resident pyromaniac dropped out of a tree and sauntered into the clearing, seemingly oblivious to the withering look that the other member was currently giving him. This was quickly becoming the worst-case scenario. As if to drive this point home with a sledgehammer, a large wooden form crashed to the ground from the tree above, very nearly crushing him with its incredible bulk. "Let's hurry up and finish this." The guttural voice of Sasori droned as he placed a large metal stinger against the chest of his ex-comrade, effectively pinning the man to the tree. "I dislike leaving this viper with his fangs intact." The patchwork shinobi nodded as he approached the newest addition to the reunion. "Sasori is correct. We should finish this quickly and leave. Time, and therefore money, is going to waste while we linger in this forest." Behind the miserly ninja's back, his silver-haired teammate was mimicking him with his hand and mouthing "money, money, money," complete with head bobble. The IWA Jonin snickered at this before digging out a small amount of clay and quickly kneading it to form a miniature Ryu coins, which he then began to flick at the hand puppet Kakuzu. Their small joke was amusing. At least it was until the real Kakuzu turned to face them, his eyes alight with the very fire's hell. "Is there something you wish to say to me, Hayden?" He then shifted those eerie green eyes to settle on the Stonin. "Deidara?" the man questioned in a tone that promised instant death. For his part, the blonde was perfectly happy to bite out a quick "no, Kakuzu-senpai," before going ramrod straight and standing at attention. The other source of the man's ire, however, seemed perfectly happy to voice his opinion. Deidara fought the urge to cringe. His loud, stupid opinion. "Fuck no! I never want to talk to your stupid ass!" Hayden shot back. "Why don't you just do your goddamn job and keep an eye on Snake Fag over there until leader shows up?" Kakuzu's acidic emerald eyes narrowed in anger. "Was that an order, subordinate?" he asked, purposefully stressing the last word to remind his disobedient partner of his place. The blonde terrorist beside the man in question slowly began to slide away into cover behind a nearby tree. When the immortal duo argued, things around them had a bad habit of getting broken. Or blown up. Or sent to hell. Fortunately for Deidara, things didn't get a chance to progress to that point, as suddenly the foul-mouthed man found himself crushed beneath the boot of an invisible tyrant. The remaining ninja stiffened. At least most of them did. With Sasori it was never very easy to tell. "You will be silent, Hayden," commanded a voice that was as cold and unbending as steel. When that man came gliding out of the darkness, flanked on either side by a pair of figures also clad in black cloaks, the Snake Sannin knew that his fate was sealed. Pain skated through the air into the clearing, his appearance unchanged even after the many years that had passed since Orochimaru had defected from the organization. But something was different. The Renegade wielder had never been a kind man, but now those multi-ring eyes held something dark and sinister within them, like he wasn't even human anymore. Power radiated from him, matchless, oppressive, overwhelming power. Indeed, the very warp and weft of space seemed to distort and bend, bowing to his might. Slung across his hip was blade, simple and elegant in its design, which was seemingly formed entirely out of jade. It glittered and flashed at odd intervals, not reflecting light but instead creating it, as though the fragile-looking katana held back a raging tempest within its crystalline form. Pain's hand never strayed from the hilt of his blade. Orochimaru recognized the other two members behind the man as Itachi and Kisame, though unlike their leader the two missing nin had drastically changed since he'd last seen them. Kisame was easily the one who drew the Sannin's attention first. The bulky blue-skinned man was never exactly textbook normal with regard to how a human being was supposed to look in the first place. Now he didn't even look like he was alive. Large metal bars stuck out of the man's back, chest, and shoulders at awkward angles, and his every footfall was accompanied by the mechanical ratcheting of gears and motors. His arms were impossibly long, dragging haphazardly against the ground as he continued to lurch forward, with each finger ending with long hook-like saw blade. All six his arms. An impossibly wide grin was frozen on the swordsman's face, revealing that his shark-like teeth had also been replaced with blades. But the most disturbing change by far was the Rennigan eyes that glowed dimly within the man's eye sockets. Likewise, Itachi also sported an array of black iron bars that protruded from his body. On either side, for long ebon needles ran through the length of the man's ears, and the bridge of his nose was now studded with rings. His normally jet black hair was now a shade of bright orange, and pulled up on his head into a topknot which had been anchored in place by yet another black needle. His Mangekyo Sharingan spun slowly in his dead eyes. It seemed to be stuck in an eternally active state, causing bloody tears to continuously trickle down the leaf-mean's stoic face. Like his partner's eyes, they too were emblazoned with the rings of the Rennigan. The amicage swiveled in the air before descending to the ground next to the pinned form of Haiden. Insubordination is normally punished by death. Haiden. The Rain-Nin drawled disinterestedly as the other two paths converged on the momentarily forgotten Orochimaru and hoisted the man to his feet. Even with the amount of blood that he'd lost, the Sannin was hard-pressed to ignore the cruel glint that shone in eyes of his old leader. Indeed, his eyes often held the very same look when he was doling out punishment to his subordinates. It was a look of absolute authority and subtle amusement that currently graced the face of Akatsuki's leader. Haiden was sprawled out on the ground before him, struggling to no avail against the merciless pressure that pinned him to the ground, almost as if he was bowing to pain. The Rennigan wielder quickly schooled his features into a mask of indifference. Do not think yourself above the laws of Akatsuki simply because you are immortal. If I cannot kill you, then I will have to come up with another method to make you obey. The shadow of a smirk ghosted over his face. I'm quite imaginative. He punctuated his words with blasts of force that cracked the ground and caused his subordinate to cry out. Have I made myself clear? A choking sound was the sadist's only response. Pain gave a slow nod before letting the man regain his footing. He then shifted his gaze to Orochimaru, who by this point had been rendered all but unconscious due to blood loss. Zetsu and Sasori have informed me that you are planning to wage war on the Leaf in a month's time. A scowl hardened on the Amiku's face. Pain's hatred for Konoha was well known to the members of Akatsuki. The fact that Orochimaru was bold enough to declare war on the Leaf before the Rain-Nin had his fun was almost certain to be seen as a personal insult. Wisely, the other four men took a few steps away from their condemned ex-comrade. They tell me that you've dripped your poison words into the ear of the Kazekage. He scoffed in contempt, and that the fool actually thinks that you'll uphold your end of the bargain. You've also managed to acquire a hidden village of your own, this village hidden by sound. It seems you have quite a following, a small personal army last time we checked. The man's ringed eyes narrowed. Not only that, but you've managed to convince the Raikage to aid you in this endeavor. And by sending both of his Jinchuriki to the village no less. Clearly you were withholding your true talents when you were part of our organization. The Snake Sannin smirked at the anger in the man's voice. If he was going to die, it was a small comfort to know that he'd been able to stick it to Akatsuki one last time. Allow me to remedy this. Pain raised his hand at Serpent Wielder. Bansho Tenin? Now was the time. As he careened through the air towards the outstretched crystal blade, Orochimaru's arm snapped out with blinding speed, firmly grasping his killer's hand even as the sword of viridian flame bit into his heart. Twin Snake's suicide technique. Yujito let out a cat-like yawn as she awoke on the couch in her team's room. She didn't bother to open her eyes, having dubbed the action to be more trouble than it was worth, before snuggling deeper into the side of Killer Bee, who was currently playing the role of her pillow. Her actions were rewarded with a soft chuckle as the man beside her began to comb his fingers through her soft, silky hair. She leaned into the affection and found herself lulled into sort of a half-sleep by the man's ministrations and the baritone murmur of his voice. No doubt trying to find lyrics to his latest rap. Too soon for her liking, the other Jinchuriki's hand pulled away to scribble something down on his notepad, an action which left his blonde partner alone with her thoughts. She was content to simply lie there and muse about the oddities of her life. Like the fact that she was taking the Chunin exams for a second time. It had been over 16 years since she'd originally taken the exams, and as expected of a demon vessel she had passed them with almost trivial ease. It had been one decisive victory after another for Yujito. In fact, she couldn't recall getting hit once throughout the entirety of the test, and most of the records that she'd set remained intact even to this day. So why the hell was she taking the exam again? Because Reikage-sama said so? Yeah, that seemed to be about par for the course. She'd gone from one of the most accomplished jonin in the history of Kyuubi to a genin in a single day. What was even stranger than that was fact that T, an ANBU legend nearly equal in strength to the now diseased Kopinin, and Killer B, probably the strongest man in all the elemental lands, had accompanied her in her fall from grace. Why the Reikage wanted them to wail on genin had been a mystery to her. Sending a team like this to take the Chunin exams was like swatting a fly with a building. Sending a team like this to go to war, though, now that seemed far more believable. And when the Reikage reveled that their true mission was to act as the primary invasion force in a war with the Leaf Village, she hadn't even blinked. Tensions had been building between Kumo and Konoha for years. The Hyuga incident and the demon child sniping spree were just the latest additions to a long list of reasons for why the two villages were at each other's throats. In reality, the First Shinobi World War never really ended between the Leaf and Cloud villages. Though, she supposed that this rang true for any village. The very nature of the world that they lived in bred this state of eternal unrest. When you were a ninja, you lied, stole, and backstabbed without a second thought. Treachery was not only expected, it was encouraged. And those who were too honorable to engage in such behavior often found their throats cut while they slept. Not only this, their tales were then told to academy students who were taught to regard these individuals as fools who deserved their fates. Because of this, it was often the most paranoid and unscrupulous ninja in the village rather than the most powerful who usually ended up as Kage. Now, if you were to expand this behavior to a continental scale and throw some political tensions into the mix, you could see why war, any war, was inevitable. The thought left a bitter taste in her mouth, and she instead began to think of other things. War would come whether she wanted it to or not, so she saw little purpose in making herself depressed over something she was powerless to change. She was a ninja. It wasn't her place to question such things. Yujito was roused from her thoughts by Killer Bee's rhymes. Soon everyone'll know how I laid 'em low. Ain't no one around to be the Killer Bee's foe. 'Cause after 889 there'll be nowhere to go. I'm the top of the top, the cream of the crop. He thinks he's strong with his nine-tailed soul, but I'll chew him up like a casserole. Ah yeah. God, this war is gonna suck. On their own, each Jinchuriki held enough power to raise a hidden village to the Gorand. With 4 of them present, Konoha was going to end up as little more than a memory. Why the Hokage had ever allowed any of them into the village in the first place was beyond her. The blonde demon container cracked an eyelid just enough to catch a glimpse of the man sitting next to her. B had a goofy grin on his face as his head bobbed up and down to some unheard rhythm, stopping every so often to scribble something on his notepad. For a man who would have to face the legendary Nine Tails, he showed a suicidal lack of concern. Though, if someone had to face Konoha's pet demon, she was hard-pressed to think of a better candidate than the vessel of the Hachibi. She'd only seen the two of them interact with each other a handful of times, but in those brief moments it became all too apparent how disturbingly similar the two Jinchuriki were. The way they spoke and acted when they were together was unsettling. It was as though their demons were speaking to one another, their true forms just barely concealed by the disguises of flesh that they wore. But it was the things that the pair left unsaid that resonated the loudest for Yujito. It was subtle. Were she not a demon vessel herself, she probably wouldn't have been able to notice it, but when Naruto and B locked eyes, she could almost see their thoughts syncing up. Like they'd known each other for so long that words were merely a formality at that point. B had once used a word in the language of demons to describe this merging effect that occurred between the minds of a Biju and its Jinchuriki. Mirroring was what the word roughly translated into. The power of the tailed beasts was beyond the comprehension of mortals on a fundamental level, alien to the point that their minds knew of secrets that were literally unknowable to a human. B had described it as trying to think of a new color. Regardless of how hard you tried, you'd only ever be able to come up with variations on an existing color. When a tailed beast is placed inside a mortal body, the minds of both prisoner and host become inseparably linked by their chakra systems. At that point, the mortal is no longer a mortal. His mind and soul is forced to change in order to accommodate the influx of power and knowledge that the Biju provides. And this change is always the most drastic in the host of a Biju that has a high number of tails. It would certainly explain why Bee knew as much as he did about the tailed beasts. Likewise, it explained her frustrating, and oftentimes embarrassing, lack of knowledge regarding the subject. Like the fact that teenage Jinchuriki give off enough pheromones to render normal human unconscious. A faint blush dusted her cheeks as her actions upon meeting Naruto swam to the forefront of her mind. As fun as it was to fuck like crazed animals, she'd had her fill of it during her teenage years with Bee. Though she had to admit, it was rather cute to watch the little redhead from Suna toddle after her with wide eyes like a lost puppy dog. Or the fact that Jinchuriki didn't kiss. When she was younger, the fact that Bee wouldn't return her affections left her feeling cold and alone. But as she grew older, she came to understand, and even share, his aversion to the act. Kissing was something that humans did to show that they loved each other. They were demons. The very idea of love was anathema to them. She cared for Bee. She respected him greatly. He was absolutely irreplaceable to her. But she didn't love him. At least not in the way that two humans love each other. It was likely that the ability to love was one of the things that a Jinchuriki lost during the mirroring. Hers had probably been replaced by one of her numerous cat-like quirks or her weird love for sunsets. Why did she like them so much anyway? "Hey Bee?" she mumbled sleepily. "Yo. Why do Jinchuriki like sunsets so much?" The large man went rigid for a moment, an action which caused his feline companion to look up at him in question, before letting out a chuckle and tossing his notebook and pencil onto the nearby table. He stroked his beard for a few seconds, opened his mouth as if to say something, and then suddenly got a far-off look in his eyes and returned to stroking his beard. This happened several more times before Yujito felt that it was time to step in. "Bee?" she growled, "I can tell when you're fucking with me. Whatever story you're about to feed me. I'm not trying to make up anything," the other demon vessel quickly assured her. "It's just that the story is long and involved. Even I don't remember the finer points of it." The kunoichi sighed. This kind of thing happened wearily often whenever she asked him Jinchuriki-related questions. She didn't care about the 300 years or so of why and how and who behind the question. She was just bored and looking to pass the time. "Will give me the short version then." Bee once again stroked his chin before letting his arm fall slack. "Back in the Marinko's era, also known in our tongue as..." The blonde grit her teeth. "The short version, please." Her partner deflated a bit, and muttered something about the kids these days before turning to face her. "What do you remember about the Tenchi?" he asked in that infuriating manner of his that said he knew more than he was letting on. She bristled at the word. She knew that she hated the Tenchi. Or more accurately, the Nibi hated them. They were an enemy of some kind, a faceless foe that threatened her existence long ago. A soupy mess of formless images and nameless sounds formed in her mind. It was like a word on the tip of her tongue. If she tried hard enough, she could almost make the pictures come together, but then she would lose her hold on them and they would dissolve into chaos again. "They were angels, right?" she asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Bee let out a derisive snort. "They certainly seemed to think so. We waged war with their kind for more than a millennia. There were 9 of them, the same as us, and they were our equals in terms of power. Except for one of us. The Ninetales," she breathed. A hollow grin formed on the Cloudnine's face. "That's right. Even back then the Ninetales was uncontested in terms of strength. However, his pride was equally strong, and he refused to fight with us against the Tenchi, claiming that he was without equal and that such a battle was beneath him." Bee's voice became like ice. "We were defeated and captured. In secret, the Tenchi had devised a weapon to slay our kind. Shippunaji. The tail-cutter sword. One by one we fell before the blade's might, and soon only the Kyuubi was left to face the Tenchi." A spark of sanguine light flashed behind the Jinchuriki's sunglasses, but we were all of us deceived. The Ninetales tricked the Tenchi's servant, the Wolf King, into stealing the blade from them. With Shippunaji in hand, he was able to channel the power of all 9 of the tailed beasts. In that moment we struck as one and set fire to the sky. With the Tenchi defeated, he broke the seal on the blade, freeing us from our prison, and cast the weapon into the sea. Yujito stared at him with wide eyes as the memories pieced themselves together within her mind. She was there. She could feel the heat of the flames as her kind incinerated the heavens, feel the infinite power of a god as their souls came together in the body of the 9-tailed king. Taste the sweet release as the Kyuubi set them free. That is why our kind loves the setting sun. It reminds us of our power, of well-deserved victories, and that we are not alone even though it sometimes seems that way. B concluded his story. For a long while the Nibi Jinchuriki was silent, the long-forgotten memories washed over her. She turned her attention to the window across from her, watching as the first amber rays of dusk began to creep into the room. She felt very small right now. Why did the Kyuubi come back for us? She asked in a tentative voice that was almost a whisper. The man beside her chuckled, her question no doubt dragging yet another story out of the Eight Tails library. I've wondered the same thing for quite some time, little Two Tails. I think he was lonely without us, though I'll damned if he ever admits it. He's not nearly as heartless as he likes others to think he is, but his pride, every bit of that is true. B's head perked up and he turned to look out the window towards the light-gilded forest that lay beyond it. Do you feel him coming, Two Tails? I surely do. Yujito was beginning to get a little creeped out by all of this demon stuff, but shook her head and played along. He'll be here within the hour. A mad grin stretched across the man's face. Perhaps you can ask him in person. Chapter 20, Set in Motion. Team 7 had spent the day marching through the forest. Well, Naruto had anyway. Kiba had spent the vast majority of the day trying not to pass out from the blinding pain that dogged his every step as he carried not only Akamaru but also Sasuke. And during the fleeting moments when he wasn't fighting to stay conscious, he was battling against the edge of a nervous breakdown. I killed them. The thought alone was enough to churn the bile in his gut. Ino, Shika, and Chuji were dead because of him. He'd lead the monster right to them, and he was laughing while he did it. He thought it was a joke, just a fun way to mess around with his lazy friend. Ha ha, Shikamaru's got dog pee all over him. Now he's gonna smell piss all day. More like Shika's gonna smell like a big fucking target to the man-eating killing machine who's currently in a competition designed around killing everyone who wasn't on his team. He fought back the hot tears that threatened to fall from his eyes. Why wasn't he able to just leave well enough alone? Just for once, couldn't he have just walked away without smacking the bear in the face? No, of course not. He was Inuzuka Kiba after all, a proud and powerful ninja from a great clan. God forbid that he have a little forethought about the repercussions of his actions. This was why he was dead last at the academy. He couldn't just sit still long enough to think about what he was doing. Back then, charging in guns blazing and getting all your friends shot in the ass just meant that the class would laugh at you for a while and that you'd get a firm reprimand from Irika-sensei. In the real world, the situation would resolve itself with the grisly demise of two of your friends that you've known from birth and the teammate that you've sworn to protect. Funny. That's what Irika-sensei always said to me. The cargo on his back began to stir, signaling that Sasuke was finally about to come to. Oh wow. The Uchiha groaned pitifully as he cracked his charcoal eyes. It feels like someone curb-stomped my head. The comment drew out barking laugh from the sadistic Jinchuriki in front of them. Let me assure you, Uchiha, that thought was the furthest thing from my mind as I looked upon your beaten form. The blonde stopped in his tracks and locked eyes with Kiba. I can't say the same thing for the young Inuzuka though. He's become quite adept at ending friendships lately. Kiba grit his teeth and let his gaze fall from Naruto's while Sasuke regarded the exchange with no small amount of confusion. Kiba. The dog mean remained silent. Kiba, put me down. Your hands are on my ass and you smell like a dog. The Uchiha soon found himself unceremoniously dumped on the forest floor. He brushed a bit of dirt from his clothes, trying his best to play it as cool as he could, before standing to a wobbly base. Now tell me what happened. The boy's eyes darted for a second toward the clearly amused demon vessel behind them. You didn't actually think about curb stomping when I was down, did you? Of course not. The Inuzuka shot back in a heated voice before going strangely silent, apparently preferring to look at his shoes than answer his friend's questions. The Sharingan wielder raised an eyebrow at his teammate's behavior and tilted his head to get the boy to look at him. Kiba responded by turning his head to look away. Kiba. Sasuke prodded warningly. Ino's team is dead. The Uchiha's eyes went wide. In the background he could hear his other teammate chuckle darkly. What happened? He ground out. He followed Akamaru's scent to Shika. He took their scroll from them. The Uchiha rounded on the madly grinning Naruto, his eyes alight with murderous intent. What did you do to them? He roared, the threat of death just barely keeping him from activating his Sharingan and rushing the blonde. The other boy let out an arrogant laugh as he began to approach the seething Uchiha. What did I do? Why, nothing, of course. I simply asked to give me their scroll and they were only too happy to give it to me. I've been told that I can be very— He extended one of his talons with a soft click. Persuasive. The barest sliver of crimson was beginning to bleed into Sasuke's eyes as his hand instinctively began to reach for the kunai pouch on his hip. Careful now, little Uchiha. The demon child purred darkly as the rest of his claws sprung out with a screech. I wouldn't want you to do something foolish. He shifted his eyes to Kiba. Inuzuka, your friend, is obviously still disoriented from his humiliating defeat. We shall sit down and rest a while. I've been neglecting the two of you. It's so terribly rude of me after all, eating my fill without thinking of you. You must be hungry. Against his will, the dog-mean's stomach let out a loud growl. His rage and guilt were no longer strong enough to distract him from the crippling, agonizing hunger that he currently felt. If he wasn't positive that the cruel Jinchuriki was going to drag him by the hair to the end of the exam, he would have collapsed from exhaustion a long time ago. As much as he wanted to bury a knife in the other boy's smug face, he would have been lying to himself if he thought that he had the energy to make good on the act. Here, the boy said as he unsealed a large slab of raw meat from a scroll in his jacket pocket. This should suffice, I hope. He tossed the hunk of flesh in front of the visibly drooling Inuzuka. Sasuke was about to say something about not needing the monster's pity, but his teammate beat him to the punch as he literally dove on the meat and proceeded to gorge himself on the stuff. Naruto's eyes got manically wide as his grin threatened to split his face in half. Ino says hi. Kiba heaved violently at the boy's words. Sasuke was already in motion, kunai in hand and Sharingan eyes blazing as he shot through the air towards the hysterical Jinchuriki. His blade sliced deeply into the other boy's neck, sending a spray of blood into vegetation around them. Naruto's retort to the attack was a backhand that nearly twisted the Uchiha's head off. He sailed through the air until his journey was cut painfully short by flying haymaker that almost certainly broke his back as it planted him in the ground. There wasn't even time to register the last blow before a punishing kick caught him in the ribs, sending him spiraling through the air into the trunk of a nearby tree. Sasuke struggled to regain his footing, but Naruto was immediately upon him, wrenching the boy up by his hair and lifting him into the air so that their flaming scarlet eyes were directly across from each other. I told you that I would take those eyes from you the next time you looked upon me with them, Uchiha. The Jinchuriki cooed in sickeningly sweet voice. And I always keep my promises. After all, it's my ninja way. Sasuke closed his eyes when the screech of metal on metal met his ears, bracing himself against the inevitable pain that those wicked blades were about to inflict on him. Except nothing happened. The Uchiha mustered up the courage to open his eyes. But the sight that greeted him was almost too much to believe. Naruto was standing in front of him, his face a mixture of confusion and disbelief as he looked down at the mess of long 8-inch talons that sprouted from his chest. Talons that Inuzuka Kiba had currently run him through with. Put him down, you bastard! The dog Nin growled darkly. Sparks of crimson light began to arc off the demon vessel's body. Should I now? He threw Sasuke aside and disappeared from view. Kiba's glowing red eyes swiveled around wildly as he tried to locate his missing target. The other boy reappeared on the branch of a tree behind him, causing the dog Nin to whip around and adopt a low defensive stance. What he saw made his blood run cold. Naruto was spinning a large steel ball on the tip of his finger and grinning like a lunatic as he took aim at the Inuzuka. Let's see how fast you are when I know you're coming. He let the projectile fly at such speeds that Kiba could do little more than brace himself for the impact. But it never came. The cannonade was suddenly stopped dead by the clawed hand of his teammate. Kiba looked at the Uchiha with wide eyes. Stemming from his neck, Sasuke currently had a black flame-like pattern running up the length of his arm and spreading across his face. The Sharingan spun wildly in his left eye while the other had taken on a golden appearance similar to that of a snake. He gave a fanged grin to his teammate. You aren't planning on giving up on me that fast, are you, dead last? Kiba returned a dagger-filled smile of his own. Hell no, you stuck-up prick. Just try and keep up with me. Oh, what fun! Naruto screamed madly from his perch above the pair, as he juggled a pair of steel spheres. Toys that fix themselves. Now I don't have to hold back anymore. The pair tensed themselves in preparation for the rain of steel that was sure to come when a familiar voice suddenly rang out. Kiba-kun! Sasuke-kun! What the hell are three of you doing? A pause, and what happened to your guys' faces? The pair let their eyes snap toward the voice's location for a fraction of a second, and what they saw nearly made them fall on their faces. It was Ino. And Shikamaru. And Chuji. They were alive. Wait, what? Neither Kiba nor Sasuke could believe what they were seeing. Had Jiraiya himself not told them about his godson's abysmal genjutsu skills, they would have thought that the boy was trying to distract them. Even so, they sent out a chakra pulse to disrupt the illusion just in case Naruto had picked up on his demon's aptitude for trickery. But nothing happened. Team 9 was really alive. Definitely worse for the wear if the cuts and bruises on Ino and Shikamaru or the sling that Chuji had his arm wrapped in had anything to say about it, but they were still very much among the living. The shrieking laughter of the blonde Jinchuriki filled the air. Naruto was so beside himself with the whole situation that he fell, still laughing madly all the way, head first onto the forest floor some 60 feet below him. Sasuke and Kiba only had the chance to share a confounded look before a loud crack signified that the boy had gotten his back on, before he promptly lost it again. The 5 genin watched with no small amount of horror as the demon child broke down into tears, clutching his gut and gibbering like a loon, as he rolled back and forth on the ground. Oh God, I can't even. He dissolved into hysterics before he could finish the thought. Shikamaru gave the pair a confounded look, as if to say, what the hell did we stumble into? Chuji decided to take a more direct route. Okay, what the fuck, yet just in general, what the fuck? By this time Kiba and Sasuke had reverted to their normal forms and the duo had their eyes scrunched shut in exasperation. Naruto's a dick who likes to mess with people. The Inuzuka clarified needlessly. And apparently we're idiots. Well, yeah. We already knew that. Ino deadpanned. But what could possibly be so funny that would make she reach for the right words? Will anyone laugh like that? The boy decided to answer that question himself as he sprang from his place on the ground to land behind his teammates. He draped his arms over their shoulders in a sort of buddy-buddy fashion that caused the pair no small amount of discomfort. They thought I killed you, Naruto blurted out as though it were the funniest thing in the world. The pineapple-haired genin quirked an eyebrow at this. That's not very funny. His heavy-set teammate nodded his head in agreement. Yeah, I don't get it. You kill people all the time. He rubbed his arm in the sling. Damn near did too. He added under his breath. Wait, it gets better. As if that wasn't good enough, they thought that I fed you. He pointed at the blonde kunoichi. To Kiba. The boy threw back his head and howled in laughter at the looks of horror disgust that played across the faces of Team 10. That's it. That was just what they looked like, except 100 times better. Oh God, I love you peasants. Totally worth all the horseshit just for that. Kiba fumbled in his coat for a moment before withdrawing his team's scroll. But it smells like Ino. He sputtered. That's because I was the one carrying it before your teammate decided to relive us of it, Ino said as she glared at Naruto, who did his best to look innocent. She then rounded on Kiba. Thanks for leading him right to us, by the way. Chuji almost lost his arm because of that. Kiba's face fell as he once again felt an icy wave of guilt wash over him and settle uncomfortably in his stomach. He opened his mouth, fully prepared to beg his friends for forgiveness, but soon found himself cut off by his sadistic teammate. Oh, come now, you can't seriously be angry at the Inuzuka, can you? Team 10 sent the grinning boy a shared look that clearly said like hell we can't. Naruto's grin intensified. You three don't understand just how lucky you are, do you? Don't let my winning smile fool you, I'm really rather cruel. It's quite a miracle that you're all still breathing, let alone mostly intact. Be happy, the boy's eyes flashed murderously. If there's one thing that truly infuriates me, it's ingratitude. The genin in question shared a nervous look and unconsciously took a few steps backward. For their parts, both Kiba and Sasuke tensed under the Jinchuriki's tightening grip in preparation to defend their friends. But then Naruto began to laugh again, and the tension lessened slightly. At the risk of appearing sociable, I have to admit, I actually hate you three the least out of all the little leaf nin in this exam. All the little leaf nin returned his sentiments with a flat look that clearly showed they didn't believe him. I'm serious. The blonde insisted in the mock childish voice that he often used when messing with people. Akimichi, please tell the class how I took your scroll from your team. Chuji's face reddened in anger, as he relived the moment. You jumped us when we were sleeping and threatened to rip my arm off and beat the others to death with it if we didn't give you our scroll. I did do that, didn't I? Naruto questioned in a far-off manner. Good times. And how did your teammates respond to this? Ino gave you the scroll and you left. A smirk pulled at the boy's mouth. Exactly. She did what I asked her to do quickly, quietly, and to the best of her ability. See, that's what I love about your team. You're weak. His eyes moved to Chuji, and fat, they went to Shikamaru and lazy, they finally settled on Ino and, he stopped for a second before stroking his chin. The pause lasted for a while longer until the other blonde spoke up and cute. She said reachingly. Naruto smiled, oh sure, why not? And cute. Ino sent her clearly unamused teammates a smug look. But more than this, you all know it. Likewise you acknowledge me as your better and seek to please me. You will live long with this kind of mindset. The demon child squeezed Sasuke's shoulder rather painfully. Perhaps you could learn from their example, Uchiha. You appear to be suicidally keen to piss me off lately. The boy merely grunted in return. Well now, if everyone's done going potty, I think we should head for the tower. It would be terribly rude of us to keep everyone waiting. The genin shared a round of uncertain nods before trailing after Naruto, who'd already began to plow through the underbrush. Sasuke turned his head toward his blonde former teammate. Are you guys okay? Ino smiled at his concern. Yeah, we're okay for the most part. Naruto yanked on Chuji's arm pretty good. I'm almost positive that it's dislocated and that some of his ligaments might be torn, but he'll live. She twirled her bangs sheepishly. It was like Naruto said, we didn't even try to fight back. We just gave up and gave him the scroll. It doesn't really matter, I guess. We ended up stumbling across another one sitting inside a pair of bloody clothes. I guess whoever killed the other person didn't even bother to take their scroll. Sasuke nodded. You did good. You guys are no match for him. And you think you are? She shot back. You can't keep challenging him, Sasuke-kun. One of these days he'll really kill you. Her eyes fell and the heat left her voice. I don't think I could deal with losing you. And neither could Kiba. He talks a big game about how he wants to kick your ass, but you really mean a lot to him, even if he won't admit it. A scowl formed on the Uchiha's face. I wouldn't be too sure about that. I'd become much stronger out here in the forest. Ino remembered the way he and Kiba looked when her team had stumbled in on the fight. Her teammates had looked like monsters. Especially Kiba. With those long razor-like claws, glowing red eyes, and a fawn-filled grin, she'd initially thought that she'd run across the demon of the leaf again. More than that though, something about her teammate felt wrong. It was almost like the feeling that she got when Naruto was around. She shuddered. So what did happen to you guys to make you look that way? Sasuke honestly didn't know what happened to make them change like that. All he remembered was that he was in pain, and then suddenly he wasn't. That, and he felt like he was strong enough to tear a man in half. He was about to tell her an edited version of his thoughts until Naruto interrupted him. Let the poor Uchiha be, my pet, he's had a rough day. The Jinchuriki let his eyes fall onto the girl. Come here, Ino-chan. I'm lonely walking up here all by myself. She gave her dark-haired teammate a nervous look before slowly walking over to the other blonde. Naruto wasted no time in making the kunoichi as uncomfortable as he possibly could by wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her close against him as he continued to walk. It's because you're so cute, Ino-chan. He purred darkly into her ear, his hot breath sending unpleasant shivers down her spine. Shikamaru didn't like the look of this situation. He never heard anything about the demon child forcing himself on someone, but there was a first time for everything. God, he wished that the boy was sane. At least then he'd be able to get a bead on when he was being serious, and when he was playing with their minds. All his tactical genius went right out the window when he was dealing with an opponent who was literally willing to die from laughter. Kiba's thoughts were of the same vein as his shadow-using friend, though they were admittedly duller. Why is she Ino-chan while everyone else is their clan name? He whispered to no one in particular. Fuck you, that's why. The Jinchuriki answered bluntly as he and his unwilling companion continued to march ahead of the group towards the end of the second phase of the exams. Mitarashi Anko let out a sigh as she stood at the entrance to the large tower in the center of the Forest of Death. She was not looking forward to what she was about to have to do. For whatever reason, it seemed that this year was the year that old Sarutobi finally went out of his mind. Not only was the demon of Konoha participating in the exams this year, a fact that made ritual suicide sound like a valid alternative to proctoring the exam, but so were all of his freaky little demon friends. It was the team from Cloud that legitimately scared the crap out of her, though. She knew for a fact that all of their members were high-level jonin. Hell, she'd actually faced off against T on one of her missions, and she knew firsthand just how dangerous the man could be. And, as if that wasn't bad enough, he was paired with not one but two Jinchuriki. And one of them played host to the Eight Tails. How could the Hokage allow this team into the exams, let alone into the village? They'd gotten through the second phase of the exams in 7 minutes and 34 seconds. 7 minutes. It took her at least 40 minutes to get through the forest, and that was without having to collect a scroll and contend with other ninja. After they'd left, she went ahead and calculated how fast that they would have to be moving to get through the forest in 7 minutes. Answer: about 200 miles per hour. You've got to be fucking kidding. And from there it didn't get much better. The team from Suna made it to the tower in only 97 minutes, which broke the old record by a good 4 hours. And then Mike Guy's team showed up only about 6 hours later. Whatever the man was feeding his genin, she wanted some. Now, if she was to believe what her scouts were telling her, the vessel of the Nine Tails was making his way to the tower with Asuma's team in tow. Normally she'd make some snide remark about Team 7 doing it wrong since they managed to come out of the exam with more team members than they went in with. But with the way that the forest had been lighting up like the sun last night, she didn't think that that was a very good idea. This whole situation was way too concerning for words to describe. And her fears most certainly did not get better after she'd caught glimpses of Sarutobi, Jiraiya, Danzo, and Shikaka coming out of the Kenjutsu vaults late at night. The old man knew that something big was about to happen, and she definitely did not like being left in the dark. Especially since it was her fine ass that was going to be on the chopping block. An unfamiliar presence at her back instantly had the serpent mistress on high alert. She whipped around, kunai in hand, only to realize a split second later that she'd just drawn her weapon on the absolute last person that she wanted to have mad at her. Killer B. The large, dark-skinned man looked down at her with an amused smirk as he nonchalantly moved the point of her kunai away from his face. Come on, snaky snake. You gotta look before you leap. You gotta be careful what you sow. A toothy grin spread across the man's face. 'Cause I ain't careful when I reap. You feel me? Enko put the knife away and smiled the fakest smile she could muster while she inwardly began to form battle plans for what would almost certainly be her final fight. She rubbed the back of her neck in embarrassment. Sorry about that. Killer B. The man finished for her. Killer 8. Another voice echoed from behind her. As much as she didn't want to, Enko turned around anyway. The sight that greeted her was that of the demon child looking just as crazy as he always did, with a thoroughly freaked-out Yamanaka cradled snugly by his side. Trailing just a short distance behind the pair was the rest of their team members. My dear Killer 8. The boy continued. He released his intimate grip on Ino, who wasted no time in scurrying away from the boy and back to the safety of her team. I wasn't expecting you to greet me in person. If I had known that I'd be entertaining company, I would have made myself presentable. The man smirked and looked over Naruto's shoulder to the light of the dying sun. Ain't gonna stay long, just whack when the sunset. Big day after tomorrow, I may not be ready yet. A smile spread across the Jinchuriki's face as he handed his pair of scrolls to Enko. You really must hire an exterminator, he commented absently as he too turned to watch the burning sky. I fear that your forest might have something of a snake problem. The words set off warning bells in the Jonin's head, but she still managed to play it cool. What's the matter? Did one of the brats on your team get bitten or something? Naruto chuckled. Yes, indeed he did. The little Uchiha managed to get bitten by a viper prince, same one that got you if I recall correctly. Her blood ran cold, and she unconsciously let her hand slip to the curse seal on her neck. You may want to ask the old man or my godfather if they have any antidotes still on hand. I hear tell that his venom can be rather precarious unless you deal with it quickly. His words were meaningless though. The woman had long since vanished in a swirl of leaves. XXXXXXX. Enko was praying that the fates were on her side as she burst into the Hokage's office. If they weren't, and it turned out that the old man didn't know that she was coming, she was about to find herself impaled on a half-dozen ANBU standard issue ninjato. Thankfully she wasn't, though the scene that she'd intruded on was equally disturbing. Her unannounced entrance was met with the blank stares and eerily stoic faces of the third, his student Jiraiya, and the old warmonger Danzo. She felt her skin crawl when the three men shared a look among each other before turning their attention to her. In spite of her discomfort, she hadn't forgotten her initial reason for coming here. Hokage-sama, please excuse my intrusion, sir, but I've just discovered something of dire importance to the safety of Konoha. The Hokage's face remained featureless. His old gray eyes were drilling holes into her, and she couldn't help but fidget under his unblinking gaze. Danzo-san. The Sandaime spoke without looking away from her. Please close the door. The bandaged man gave a curt bow to his leader before brushing past her to shut the door. Jiraiya. Silencing seals, please. Of course, Hokage-sama. The Toad Sandaime quickly unrolled a large scroll on his back before channeling his chakra through it. The entire room flashed blue as intricate eldritch symbols leapt from the page onto the walls and ceiling before disappearing. Now that that was out of the way, the old man turned his attention back. Anko. What have you discovered? Orochimaru has infiltrated the Chunin exams. She divulged quickly. And to make matters worse, he's branded Uchiha Sasuke with the cursed seal of the heavens. I think he plans to take the boy's body for his own. The men shared another look. It seems that things are now set in motion, Hokage-sama, just as we have predicted. Danzo spoke in a hushed tone. Did the seal show you the proper course of action to take? Sarutobi nodded and rubbed his face wearily. They showed me that if we were to remove the mark or seal away its influence, then Sasuke would fall in the battle to come. We will live it unsealed. His life and the lives of many Leaf Nin depend on it. Anko's eyes went wide at his words. He really has gone mad. Jiraiya voiced similar thoughts. Are you sure that there's no other way around this than to leave Sasuke to the seal? You and I both know firsthand just how dangerous Orochimaru's techniques can be. What if his mind isn't strong enough to handle it? It will be. At least that is what I have foreseen. We must have faith in young Sasuke. And faith in the Yandaime's technique. After all, the old man paused to let a serpent of blue smoke escape from his lips. You've already seen its power once when the Kyuubi was sealed. Suddenly it all clicked for Anko. You can see the future, can't you? That's what you've been doing in the Kinjutsu vaults. That's why you've been acting so strange lately. You know that something's about to happen. All of those Jinchuriki, you're setting them up for something. The Hokage remained stoic. Yes. You are correct on all accounts, Mitarashi-san. Danzo and Jiraiya have been keeping tabs on the Akatsuki and their associates for some time now. This, of course, also includes my old student. They will strike very soon, and when they strike they will do so with the intention of never having to strike again. The fate of the Leaf Village rests on Razor's Edge. If we stray but a little, the village will be destroyed. Anko let his words sink in. Normally she was calm and composed, but this was a perfectly acceptable time to lose her shit. Akatsuki? All of them. And Orochimaru. And 4 demon hosts, 2 of which were the 9 Tails and the 8 Tails. And any visiting Kage that happened to be invited to join in this lunacy. Sarutobi's plan had better be the best goddamn plan in the entire universe, because from where she was standing she couldn't see a future in which the village was still standing. What can we do? She asked frantically. We will play them all against each other, the old man said with the barest hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. The Akatsuki planned to capture the tailed beasts. Let's just say that the Raikage becomes quite agreeable in matters that concern the safety of his younger brother. And what about the collateral? She all but screamed at her leader. Tens of thousands are going to die in the crossfire. You're all but inviting the most powerful ninja in the entire elemental lands slug it out in the middle of the village. Konoha is going to be dust. Sarutobi let out another plume of smoke before calmly rising to his feet. Are you frightened, Mitarashi-san? Fuck yeah, I am. She shot back instantly. And anyone who says otherwise is out of their mind. That is what we're counting on, Jiraiya answered. Anko was about to say something, but the Hokage held up his hand for silence, and she instinctively complied. Though they are powerful, Akatsuki also fears the power of the tailed beasts. Their leader is a tyrant who rules over them with an iron fist, and my spies have told me that many of the members have grown discontented as of late. The majority of their organization no longer shares in their leader's fanatical goals. They now only serve his cause out of fear. With this in mind, we have reason to believe that many will defect from Akatsuki once battle is waged. Moreover, they don't seek to kill, at least not directly. They only wish to sow confusion so that they can easily capture their targets. The old man rubbed the jagged scars that ran down the length of his face. He was all too familiar with that type of tactic. Konoha is much more than just bricks and mortar and timber. It is in the lives of its people. Homes can be rebuilt far easier than human lives can. This is what the Hokage has foreseen. Danzo spoke calmly. Do you question his judgment, as well as the judgment of myself and Jiraiya-sama? She wanted to spit back a hell yeah I do, but instead opted to remain silent. Plans are already in place to evacuate the civilians and the ninja who are not suited to fight in this battle. We know the enemy's strategy, and have already devised multiple methods of counterattacking. But all of this hinges on the future remaining unchanged. Even the smallest detail could alert the Akatsuki to our plan, at which point we would all be as good as dead. None but the Hokage, myself, Jiraiya-sama, and Shikaka-san can know about the invasion. Anko's eyes widened for a moment before going hard. If her life could mean that the Leaf Village had a chance to survive, she was fully prepared to give it. She had been since the moment she first wore her hatite. Am I to report to Ibiki for execution, Hokage-sama? She questioned resolutely. The old man let the facade of indifference he wore slip away, and for the first time in long while a warm smile came to his face. He walked over to her and placed his hand reassuringly on her shoulder. No, Anko. That won't be necessary. You are a daughter of the Leaf Village and one of my many children. I would never order that unless I had no other choice. The snake mistress let out a breath that she hadn't realized she'd been holding in. Danzo is right though, Akatsuki must never know of our plans. The Hokage continued. Jiraiya is going to seal your memories of this moment away. The man in question began to unroll a scroll from his vest and motioned for Anko to come over to him. I'm sorry to do this to you, Mitarashi-san. I'm told that it can be quite painful. She gave him a grin that held far more confidence than she did. Can't hurt any more than all those beatings you get during your research, right, Jiraiya? He chuckled. No, I suppose not. Yes. Defiantly. The Toad Sannin placed his hand against the scroll and removed from it what looked like a ball of violet flame. He then placed his hand against her head. Seal. Agony exploded throughout her mind. It felt like the man was pouring a cauldron of molten lead into her skull. It hurt so bad she couldn't think, couldn't breathe. She couldn't even scream. Thankfully, after a few more seconds of this treatment, her legs buckled and she pitched forward into blissful unconsciousness. Jiraiya caught her and set her down on the floor of the Hokage's office. He turned to his teacher. You're absolutely sure that we can't remove Sasuke's cursed seal? The man gave him a resolute nod before once again lighting his pipe. He will die without its power. He'll go mad if he uses it, Jiraiya retorted. Then where will that leave us? The last thing that the village needs is another Itachi on its hands. We must deal with the problem at hand, the bandaged patriot admonished. Konoha has a war to prepare for, and we must sink all available resource into that. We will deal with other problems afterward. I must agree with Danzo, Sarutobi said. I know you feel like you're betraying your student Jiraiya, but he's going to be right in the thick of it. He will be on his own until the ANBU begin to evacuate the genin. The other man sighed. He didn't like this plan one bit. Fine. But what should we do about the rest of the genin currently still in the forest? They were to be given one more day to make it to the tower. Fail them. Have ANBU round them up and send them home. Tell them that there's a dangerous criminal on the loose in the forest, and that they had to be sent home for their own safety. Danzo sent the man a surprised look. This will not help strengthen the image of Konoha in the eyes of the other villages. I do not care. What is important now is saving as many lives as we can. I bear the burden for my actions today, and if I live through the battle I will resign immediately. Prolonged use of the Yandame's jutsu has already sealed my fate. I'll be lucky if I have the rest of the year to live. Jiraiya's face fell. He knew what the price was to activate Minato's jutsu. Even with his help, his student had barely been strong enough to seal the Nine Tails away after using the technique to predict the demon's actions. Sarutobi had been getting weaker and weaker ever since his battle with Naruto all those years ago. It was nothing short of a miracle that he'd been able to hold on for as long as he had. What should we do about those who are already in the tower? The Sannin asked. Give them a day to recover and see to their wounds. After that the preliminaries begin. Both men bowed to their leader before disappearing in a whirlwind of leaves. Chapter 21 Release Restraint. The final day of the exams passed without incident, which was nothing short of amazing considering just how many Jinchuriki were packed into a relatively small space. For the most part, the demon hosts seemed all too happy to avoid one another. Naruto, honor-bound as he was, felt there was little purpose in speaking with his eight-tailed counterpart since the man was content to speak in nothing but riddles, something which caused the boy's already dwindling patience with his current predicament to be only further exacerbated. He knew it was a mistake to accept a challenge from the man. It wasn't that he was afraid that he was going to lose. In fact, his heart pounded fervently within his chest at the prospect of the fiery, agonizing death that awaited the both of them when they inevitably clashed on the battlefield. His soul, every fiber of his being, cried out in rapture when he imagined the feel of his bones breaking beneath the other man's blows. Screamed in ecstasy at the thought of his body being slashed to ribbons by those razor-sharp blades the man carried on his back. And wept in pleasure at the taste of the man's flesh and blood as his fob-filled jaws slammed shut around the neck of his fellow Jinchuriki. No, he was afraid that he'd end up disgracing his good name by going back on their agreement and fighting Killer Bee before the designated time. The boy was sinking every ounce of his waning focus into finding some way to distract himself from the ever more appealing option of simply saying "fuck the rules, I have money," and setting off a cannonade doppelganger as he passed the other man in the hallway. As it was, the demon child contented himself by messing with the Yamanaka girl, a hobby that he was quickly finding to be far more enjoyable than he'd originally perceived it to be. Loath as he was to admit it, the impossible had happened and the little Uchiha just didn't entertain him like he used to. The spark had gone out of their relationship, and somewhere along the way Naruto had realized that, while he still loved to beat the stuffing out of the uppity Sharingan wielder, it wasn't in the same crane-kickingly good way that it had used to be. With Ino, though, it was an entirely different story. He wasn't lying when he'd said that she was cute. She was. Adorable, in fact. Especially when her face would pale to that almost corpse-like shade of whitish gray when he held her in an overly familiar fashion. To everyone else she was loud and boisterous and bossy, a proud kunoichi of the leaf who wasn't afraid to kick ass and take names if you pissed her off. But with him all the fire would seep out of her words and she'd shrink up like a delicate flower, scarcely daring to breathe for fear of upsetting him. It was all too clear why she was so nervous around him. And honestly that thought was the furthest thing from his mind. He was crazy but even he had his limits. However, she and the others didn't need to know that. "How does it feel, Ino-chan?" he whispered as he continued to comb his fingers through her hair. It feels very nice, Uzumaki-sama," she replied with a timid squeak, her whole body as stiff as a board. He lowered his nose to her hair and took in her scent, an action which caused her no small amount of dismay if her shivering had anything to say about it. "Good," he purred as he nuzzled against her. Even without his acute hearing it would have been hard not to hear her heart thundering within her chest. As he continued to play his little game he absently wondered if he could get her to faint again, like she'd done when he had first introduced himself to their little team. Probably not. The more likely scenario was that she'd be stabbing him in the face. Or perhaps a smaller, more sensitive area. A predatory grin crossed his face as he began to nibble at her ponytail. "Oh well. You never know till you try." The 15 genin found themselves in a large underground arena unlike any they'd ever seen. The vast majority of the room, or non-room as it was, consisted of a giant central pit that dropped down some 300 feet. According to the acoustics of the room, the pit was actually far deeper than this, but only those whose eyes were enhanced by demonic chakra and Niji with the aid of his Byakugan were able to tell how far down it really went. On either side of the arena were two big metal freight elevators whose purpose could only be to ferry their unfortunate guests into the yawning darkness that lay below. Shikamaru was the first to devise the purpose of the room. The implications alone were enough to make the normally laid-back genin break out into an uneasy sweat. And when the Jinchuriki shared a round of knowing laughter he only began to feel worse. Slowly the other genin came to the same conclusion as their resident genius and no one, not even the rambunctious Lee, could find the heart to act confident now. They were in demon country. This entire area was designed in hopes that the massive amount of distance between the combatants and the observers would somehow help to negate the damage that the battle between four Jinchuriki would inevitably bring. Here they were outsiders, unwelcome distractions that would only serve to draw the ire of a foe that they couldn't possibly stand against. Niji turned to his teammates. If any of us get paired against one of the ninja from Cloud, or against the redhead from Suna or Naruto, we forfeit immediately. Understood? The bun-haired weapon mistress was only too quick to nod. Lee, on the other hand, looked like he was going to be ill. Surrender wasn't a part of his vocabulary. As a genius of hard work, he'd spent his entire life playing the role of the underdog. No one ever expected anything of him, and he had to claw his way to victory every step of the way. To give up without even trying was nothing short of a mortal sin to the green-clad genin. It went against literally everything he believed in. Lee, Tenten said. He looked at her. I want you to promise me that you won't fight them. Please, Lee, they'll kill you if you get in their way. The boy let out a defeated sigh. All right, Tenten. I promise, on the fires of my youth, that I won't fight them. The words tasted so bitter when he said them. She could tell that it was truly difficult for him to say those things. She put her hand on his shoulder. Thanks, Lee. He nodded silently. Around the stadium he could see many of the other teams discussing the same matter. He couldn't help but glare at the form of Naruto, who currently stood directly across from him on the other side of the pit. The boy's eyes twinkled darkly, no doubt having heard what his teammate had said about him, and beckoned to Lee in a sort of come-and-get type gesture. The staring mock was interrupted as series of floodlights suddenly blazed to life around the arena. Don't let him get to you, Lee. The boy whipped around to see the grinning image of his sensei striking a good guy pose. Your fires of youth burn hotter than his ever will. For his part, the taijutsu specialist was more than happy to fall into this cheerful routine. Yash, Guy-sensei. I didn't even notice that you snuck up on me. As punishment, after the exams I shall do 1,000 kicks and 1,000 punches. The Jonin's grin somehow got impossibly wider, and Niji could almost hear the ping that the teeth of his eccentric teacher made. That's the spirit, Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. The pair embraced as the scene of a crashing wave during the fiery light of the dying sun played behind them. Most of the teams shared a confused look at the scene before them. Gaara, however, voiced the feelings of the Jinchuriki who were present. Pretty sunset, he murmured in a far-off manner. Yeah. Quite. Fool. Ya fool. The rest of the senseis entered the arena and took their places next to their respective teams. You guys ready for this? Jiraiya questioned his students before sending a look across the way to Ino. These preliminary matches can be brutal. I've seen people die in these things before. If you think you're outmatched, there's no pride to be lost in surrendering. Hey Jiraiya-sensei, you know what's also brutal? Kiba questioned abruptly. The man winced inwardly. No doubt his students had suffered quite an ordeal out in the forest. What? Trekking through a god-forsaken jungle for 2 days with the craziest motherfucker I've ever met. You know what the high point of that experience was? The walk-in. You wanna know the second high point? Getting my ass kicked off a tree by Stretchlegs Mji and having to drag Sasuke Sadsack through the forest all by myself while your godson bounces rocks off my head. They were teeth, goddamn you. Naruto corrected as he sauntered casually over to the group. You call yourself a ninja, pay attention. Kiba threw his hands up in an exaggerated manner. Oh, I'm sorry. They were teeth. Hey Naruto-sama, look at all the fucks I give. Huh. But you're not holding up anything. Oh, I see what you did. The boy clicked his tongue before promptly head-butting the startled Inuzuka with enough force to knock him to the ground. So how are you doing, godfather dearest? Oh, you know. My students are whiny ingrates and my godson acting unruly again. Maybe I should take a vacation. Maybe you should be quiet, Jiraiya-chan. The voice of his teacher rang out from his place on an observation deck located above the balcony that the genin were currently standing on. The Toad Sannin then looked around and realized that everyone present had seen his team's juvenile exchange. Ino, her face buried in her hands, looked particularly ashamed to say that she knew them at the moment. The man at least had the good graces to rub his head in embarrassment. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't have the good graces of a drunken gorilla and was perfectly happy to voice his feelings. Oh, come on, old man. He whined childishly. I had the best comeback in the world set up for him and you ruined it. Kiba rubbed his head as he stood up. A head but isn't a comeback, he muttered under his breath. The demon child apparently didn't believe him, and the Inuzuka once again found himself thrown to the ground by the other boy's unnaturally dense head. Shows what you know, fuckface. Fuckface. I like that one arrow. I'll have to remember that one the next time I'm climbing off your mum. The boy only stopped talking after his blonde teammate had made it physically impossible to do otherwise by planting his booted foot squarely in the boy's mouth. Unbeknownst to his teacher, Kiba had apparently not only inherited a sliver Naruto's powers, but had also inherited the boy's uncanny ability to never let a personal insult go. Oh wee! What fun Jiraiya was going to have now that he had two braying jackasses for students. It was all that he'd ever wanted. Naruto turned back to the Hokage. Can we please move this along? We all know why we're here, can't we just start kicking the crap out of each other? His lurid crimson eyes fell first to Killer Bee then to Gaara, who was already releasing a steady cloud of sand from the gourd on his back. I'm just so giddy to play my part for the village that I might go mad. He all but sang the last part. The Sandaime rubbed his face tiredly, an act that he'd found himself doing quite a lot these days. He'd had a speech prepared about the friendship and camaraderie that the Chunin exams fostered between villages. But seeing as how his village was about to be invaded by the sound, sand, and cloud, it meant literally less than nothing, because it would only serve as a self-contradiction. Hi-san. If you please. At that, a sickly-looking Chunin appeared in a flourish of leaves. The man appeared about to speak when he was suddenly beset by a coughing fit. Most of the Chunin hopefuls were anything but relieved that this was the man who would be proctoring the Jinchuriki Battle Royale. The rules for the preliminary match of the exam are exactly as stated in the paperwork that you all signed before entering the exams. Another coughing fit. If anyone wants to back out now, all you have to do is raise your hand. There were no surprised faces in the room when Chuji raised his non-dominant hand. Courtesy of Naruto, the boy's arm was pretty well injured. It wasn't drastic enough to force him to retire as a ninja. Most likely he would be fine in a couple weeks, but a few sessions of medical jutsu on a 2-day-old injury weren't nearly enough to repair the damage that had been caused. Hade merely nodded before crossing his name off his list and motioning to some unseen figure on the Kage's observation deck. Anyone else? Nobody else raised their hands. Alright, if you'll direct your attention to the board we can get this underway. They did so and names began to rapidly flash across the screen. No small amount of sweating, praying, and nail-biting took place in the brief interval before the participants of the first match were decided. Simple math told the genin that they had about a 40% chance of losing their match before it had even began. Even for a non-ninja, that was far too much uncertainty to make a person feel secure. The names on the board finally stopped, and a rush of excited whispers filled the air. Uchiha Sasuke vs Hyuga Neji. Oh, this ought to be good. Hey Sasuke, I bet you wish that you'd let me teach you kenjutsu right about now. The boy only grunted in response at his sensei's dig, but inwardly he did wish that he'd at least learned the basics. Even if he was armed with just a stick, it would have done wonders for his survivability. Against the Hyuga's Juken, blocking a strike was the same as letting them hit you in the first place. Guess he'd better not let himself get hit then. His Sharingan spun to life and he began to stare down the calmly smirking Byakugan user as they made their ways to the elevators. Don't let him smack you in your smug prick-face, Sasuke, Kiba added unhelpfully after he'd once again managed to stand up. Or let him poke you in the eye, Naruto shoehorned in. That would be just dreadful. Come on, Neji, his bun-haired teammate yelled. Poke him in the eye. Juken style, 1,000 years of death. The pearl-eyed boy simply shook his head, his arrogant smirk still firmly in place, as he stepped off the elevator. The fates are most unkind to you, Uchiha Sasuke. The veins around his eyes bulged, signaling that he'd activated his Byakugan. From the moment that you were named as my opponent, you'd already lost. Today everyone will see just which Jujutsu is the strongest. Sasuke's Sharingan rotated slowly as he mirrored the look of superiority on the other shinobi's face. Yes. They will. Above them the screen crackled to life, projecting an image of what was happening in the arena below. Hate walked over to the two boys who were busy trying to use their most prized possessions to set each other on fire. This is a competition, not a death match. If either of you become too injured to continue fighting, I will end the match, If you kill an opponent who has given up, you will be stripped of your ninja rank and executed for the crimes of murder and treason. Do I make myself quite clear? Both combatants nodded. Then begin. No sooner had the Chunin jumped clear when a blinding flash erupted between the pair. Shortly thereafter, 2 more flashes went off around the Hyuga. Niji, now fully aware of his opponent's plan, was quick to go on the defensive. It was an interesting maneuver, blinding the supposed all-seeing eye by taking advantage of the fact that it would continue working whether or not he closed his eyes in time to counter the flash bomb. Interesting but not unexpected. He'd managed to instinctively deactivate his bloodline halfway through the first flash. Niji, not entirely blind, barely managed to redirect the boy's killing blow into his shoulder. White-hot pain lanced through the Hyuga's arm as the knife no doubt found its way to his radial nerve, but he grit his teeth and lashed out with his good hand. His fingers struck Sasuke in the wrist, forcing the boy to drop his kunai, and then followed with a series of lightning-quick jabs to his midsection. The Uchiha fell to the ground, coughing up blood, before evaporating in a cloud of smoke. It was only thanks to his Sharingan and some quick thinking that kept Sasuke from ending up like his shadow clone. This was bad though. He'd used up most of his flash bombs and about a third of his chakra on that single shadow clone alone. He'd meant to end this fight in a single blow. But now, with his wrist still tingling painfully and Niji closing in at remarkable speeds, it looked as though he'd have to deal with fabled gentle fist style head-on until he could find an opportunity to gain distance. The Hyuga reactivated his Byakugan upon reaching his target and snapped off a flurry of blows, each one just barely missing their target as he continued to press his advantage and slowly back the Uchiha across the arena. Sasuke could do little more than dodge strike after countless strike as his opponent continued to gain ground on him. The boy landed 2 sharp jabs on his legs and another to his left shoulder, leaving painful numbness in their wake. Sasuke faltered again in his footing, his muscles not working properly, and was rewarded with a hard kick to the inside of his ankle. The action had him unbalanced for just a moment before he was once again in motion, but in that time 3 more blows struck home, the last of which had him coughing up blood. A flinch of pain due to Sasuke's earlier attack and barely a second of hesitation in Niji's onslaught was all it took for the wounded Uchiha to turn the tables. He read the path of the blow with his Sharingan, and redirected it before retaliating with his own version of a Juken strike as he drove his fingers into wound of Niji's injured shoulder. He twisted, kicking out his opponent's legs as he went, and then used the airborne genin like a springboard as drove the Hyuga into the ground with a vicious flip kick that created some much-needed breathing room between them. Niji, rattled but not unconscious, launched to his feet and began to rapidly close distance with his target. Another flash went off, and just as before, the Hyuga deactivated his Kekkai Genkai. Niji smirked. He was able to see perfectly this time. The Uchiha was running headlong into his own demise. He watched as the boy covered the distance between them in the blink of an eye. Niji was fully prepared to counter the punch that was aimed at his head. At least he had been until it abruptly appeared 4 inches lower than it previously was. He took the hit full in the neck and felt his windpipe bow in the most excruciating manner just before taking second and third punch to the solar plexus, which sent him to his knees in a fit of coughing. Niji looked up just in time to see Sasuke getting ready to drop kick him, and rolled to the side. But again the Uchiha's body seemed to teleport in mid-flight, and again he took the full brunt of the attack. He heard a loud crack as his jaw broke from the force of the kick, and then Niji was airborne. He activated his Byakugan to cover his blind spots, and suddenly it all made sense. Genjutsu. He made eye contact with the Uchiha's Sharingan after having deactivated his bloodline limit due to his opponent's attempt to blind him. Though they didn't truly see the Genjutsu, his eyes allowed him to realize when he'd been placed under the sway of one. After reactivating it, breaking the illusion was child's play. But Sasuke didn't need to know the last part. Niji braced himself for blow as he watched the Uchiha seemingly teleport through the air to intercept him. The punishing fist against his back had stars flying in front of his pale eyes, but the Hyuga was willing to endure a bit of pain in order to enact his plan. He spun, catching his opponent off guard with his unpredicted burst of speed, and struck like coiled viper. 2 blows, one to the stomach and one to the left pectoral. Then 2 more to the center of the Uchiha's body. He dropped low and stuck the next 4 points in the sequence: left knee, left thigh, abdomen, and right hand? That wasn't right. Niji watched with no small amount of dismay as his opponent began to mimic him perfectly, The Uchiha's now 3-tomoed Sharingan eye blazing wildly as it tracked his super-fast blows. The next 8 strikes all missed their intended targets, instead striking Sasuke's incredibly numb hands. As did the next 16, followed by the final 32. The Sharingan wielder had copied his motions perfectly throughout the full set of the 8 trigrams, 64 palms. And though his hands might never recover from the nerve damage, the Uchiha was still standing. And he was pissed. Niji's eyes went wide as the Uchiha slammed his skull against the boy's nose, causing blood to fountain from it as it broke. His neck, being one of the few places on his body that still retained feeling after Hyuga's Juken assault, didn't leave Sasuke with many options to work with. He could barely stand, let alone chase after Niji as he groggily crawled away. Similar thoughts were racing through the mind of the Hyuga prodigy. His wound from the beginning of the match was bleeding heavily now, and after taking a drop kick right to the head, his vision was way away past the point of where it could be described as jumbled and disorienting. With his 360-degree telescopic vision, he was fighting a losing battle against the nausea welling up within him, but he didn't dare deactivate it for fear of getting snared in a genjutsu again. Needless to say, he no longer had the precision required to effectively use the Juken fighting style. He had only one option left. If this next technique didn't kill him, then Guy most certainly would. But what did he expect when he tried to teach secret techniques around a Hyuga? 8 inner gates. He rasped as his eyes burned holes into the Uchiha. Gate of opening, Kai. Sasuke, not to mention the entirety of Team Guy, watched in mute horror as the Hyuga's normally lithe form went rigid as his muscles strained against their limits. Up on the balcony, Asuma let the cigarette fall from between his lips. Guy, you didn't? Guy's eyes danced with rage and his voice trembled with barely restrained fury when he spoke. No. I didn't. His eyes went to Lee, whose face was a picture of betrayal and alarm. He knew that Niji's body hadn't undergone the proper conditioning before using this technique. Even if he won the match, it would be unlikely that he'd be strong enough to fight during the finals. Actually, it would be unlikely that he'd ever be able to fight again. Gate of healing, Kai. A wave of pressure exploded outward from the boy, and the ground beneath him began to crack. And then he heard something that turned his rapidly heating blood to ice. 8 inner gates. Gate of opening, Kai. His eyes flew to Sasuke, whose muscles were also bulging unnaturally as held his supposedly injured hands in front of him in a sloppy tiger seal. His copy eye locked with Niji's gaze. Gate of healing, Kai. The ground around the Uchiha shattered. He flexed his hands as the feeling rushed back into them. Both combatants spoke as one. Gate of life, Kai. Rubble from the previous blast waves began to float upwards with nothing but raw chakra propelling it. The skin of both Sasuke and Niji took on a distinctive reddish hue as their veins surged with blood. The pair vanished in a burst of speed that even the Jonin sensei had trouble following. At this point, Jiraiya had vaulted the rail and was flying toward the arena floor. Both genin traded multiple blows, each time only appearing for a fraction of a second before their extreme speed once again rendered them invisible. Niji saw an opening and moved to end it, but the Sharingan saw through his technique, and its wielder beat him to it. Sasuke roared in pain as he launched kick after bone-shattering kick into the Hyuga, driving the duo into the air. He then torqued his body and locked the other boy's arms behind his back as they began to spiral and rocket violently towards the ground. Primary Lotus. The screams of Team Guy were drowned out by the resounding crash of breaking stone. Dust flew high into the air with the impact of the lotus, and for a few horrible seconds no one dared to breathe. At least no one except the Jinchuriki. Kiba took a few steps away from Naruto, who was cackling softly to himself and muttering in some language that made his hair stand on end. The kid from Suna looked equally unstable, having crushed part of the guard railing with a tendril of sand that had snaked out from the gourd on his back as he giggled and rocked back and forth. The pair from Kumo seemed to be faring a little better against their bloodlust, but only barely. B's face was contorted into a mad grin as he shredded his notebook with the pencil clenched in his fist. Even Yujuto, who was normally calm and collected, had a wicked sneer splayed across her face. As the dust cleared, their looks dissolved into disappointment, in the case of the two most sane demon vessels, and rage, in the case of the other two. Against all odds, Jiraiya had managed to intercept attack just before it touched down, an action which saved Niji from certain death. However, the Sannin had hardly escaped from the attack unscathed. His arms were both broken, shattered by the incredible compressional forces of the dive bomb attack, along with his right leg which was now positioned awkwardly beneath him. Hate quickly rushed over to help the Toad Sage as the man collapsed with the two genin in hand. Both were unconscious and badly injured. "Get a medic!" Jiraiya shouted as he quickly began to fashion his vest into a makeshift tourniquet to try and staunch the torrent of blood that was gushing from Niji's arm. Somewhere along the way, either during the high-speed taijutsu match or from the intense centrifugal force of the primary lotus, the Hyuga's arm had nearly been torn from the boy's torso. His student wasn't faring any better. The strain from opening 3 of the 8 gates had caused his already compromised internal organs to tear open, and large ugly bruises were rapidly forming under the boy's skin. He could hear screaming above him as the medics rushed over. Tenten was hysterical. The only thing that was keeping her from vaulting the rail as Jiraiya had done was the bear hug that Lee currently held her in. Guy, on the other hand, had no such obstacle. He hit the ground with a crash and raced over to Niji. "Guy, he's bleeding out. Cauterize the wound." The man whipped out a kunai and began to heat it with a fire jutsu until the metal glowed red hot. It hissed when it met with the remains of Niji's severed artery, and the smell of burning meat filled the air. Their first aid was crude, but it was the only thing that kept the Hyuga from dying right then and there. Both men scrambled, or crawled in Jiraiya's case, out of the way as a horde of medics descended onto the injured pair and began to perform diagnostic jutsu and prepare blood transfusions. Another trio of medics appeared and quickly began to work on the Toad Sage's broken limbs. Having been teammates with the legendary Tsunade, Jiraiya knew just how effective medical ninjutsu could be. Physical trauma was easy to deal with, especially when the time between the injury and the treatment was as short as it had been. His broken bones would be mended within the week if he received medical care daily. Sasuke and Niji, on the other hand, would take significantly longer to recover. With the quick patch job out of the way, the Hyuga's life was no longer in immediate danger. His ninja career was an entirely different matter, though. The reason that Tsunade was hailed as the greatest medic nin of all time wasn't due to the fact that she could reattach arms and legs and heal internal organs. Any well-trained medic could do these things if they were given enough time and had enough chakra. No, what set the slug Sannin apart from other medics was the fact that she was able to almost perfectly replicate the damaged tissue that she was healing all the way down to the chakra network itself. Without the woman's superb chakra control, the likelihood that Sasuke and Niji, and even Jiraiya to a very lesser extent, would be unable to properly mold chakra was much higher. He stifled a grunt as one of the medics finished splinting his leg and waved them off as he began to hobble toward one of the lifts. "Jiraiya-sama," one of the medics addressed him. "It is highly ill-advised to remain active after receiving treatment. You should be resting, not watching matches. I've done much more with much worse than this. I'll be fine for a little while. And I should be here for my students." His eyes trailed to Naruto, who was presently glaring daggers down at him. He pushed a lever and the lift groaned to life. "If I leave, I'm certain that I'll regret it." A long elevator ride later found the Toad Sage face to face with his scowling godson. "Why did you stop the match, Godfather? It was getting interesting at the end." "I was rather irritated," he said the word with gritted teeth, "when I found out that Hyuga Pate was suddenly taken off the menu." Jiraiya stumbled as they walked and was surprised to find that the boy had caught him before he fell. He hadn't done that before. The man made a point of ignoring the act lest he accidentally angered the demon child before replying. "I wouldn't be a very good teacher if I let one of my students die. My pride as a shinobi of the leaf wouldn't allow me to let a comrade die," said the man who put a Rasengan through my head. The boy no doubt understood that his godfather's words were a nod towards his own prideful behavior, but he didn't allow his face to show it. Names had once again started to flash across the screen as the pair arrived at Team 7's designated spot. Strangely, Naruto had stopped paying attention to the board. There was only a moment of confusion on Jiraiya's part before a strong wave of killing intent chased the feeling out of him. Its source was Gaara of the Desert, who was no doubt also angry that he'd prevented the gruesome conclusion of the last match. Small wisps of crimson light swirled around the boy as he stared at Jiraiya. He looked as though he was about to take a step in the man's direction, but was suddenly rebuked by a wave of killing intent so strong that the air itself seemed to ripple. The Sannin watched with a mixture of pride and fear as his godson moved between him and Gaara, shielding him from the other Jinchuriki. He was beyond happy that the boy was attached to him enough to defend him while he was injured, but at the same time he was very worried about what Naruto was about to do. He'd never seen him like this before. The boy was mad. Mad beyond words. He could feel it in the way that ground trembled ever so slightly beneath them. He could see it in the red sparks that began leap from the boy's body. Naruto stood there calmly, quietly, and entirely livid as he stared down the Sannin. The match below had concluded itself quickly. Tenten wasn't even paying attention to her fight, and was soundly defeated by the blonde from Suna. The next string of matches ended in a similar fashion. Shikamaru was paired against Lee. Lee's taijutsu was simply too fast for his shadows to keep up, and Boy found himself unconscious before he was able to devise a suitable plan. Ino struggled only slightly in her fight against Kankuro until she realized that she was fighting the Sannin's puppet and not him. With a wide area auditory genjutsu, she was able to disorient her opponent long enough for her to reach the real Kankuro on the puppet's back and put a kunai to his throat. He was quick to surrender after that. The next match was over before it began. Kiba got unlucky enough to be paired against T. Against his better judgment, the boy had decided to fight the man anyway. In total, the fight lasted less than a second and was concluded with the Genin's fist all but demolishing Kiba's face. The boy was wheeled out of the arena on a stretcher, not in any real danger of dying, but with several broken facial bones and more than a few swallowed teeth. Then things got serious. All the normal combatants were out of the way. This meant that the last two fights were going to demon against demon slugfests. The tension in the air was palpable as the contestants stared at the names on the screen. Killer Bee vs. Niyujato. Naruto's staring contest with his Suna counterpart was abruptly forgotten by the boy. A familiar mad grin stretched across the boy's face as he continued to stare at the words on the board. This would be a battle that these humans would all remember. The images and sounds of this conflict would be forever burned in their memories. The scars that his race would inflict upon the land today would never fade. Everlasting and eternal, they would serve as monuments to the power of the Biju. And never again could his kind be ignored. After today, these humans would know their place. I forfeit. Naruto's thoughts stopped dead in their tracks and his eyes went wide. A flickering single tail was beginning to form behind him as he looked on in disbelief at the Cloud Kunoichi, who was still raising her hand. His eyes then moved to Killer Bee, who was grinning like a madman at the boy's reaction. Naruto's anger only intensified. What? He whispered dangerously as the chakra tail continued to thrash behind him. I forfeit. She repeated in far more triumphant manner than her words should merit. Bee would kick my ass. And I don't want to be a chunin anyway, too much paperwork. Sorry for the letdown. Bee apologized half-heartedly. His gaze was still firmly locked with Naruto's, goading him, taunting him, laughing at him. The final names appeared on the screen. Sabaka no Gaara vs. Uzumaki Naruto. A cruel grin appeared on the Sannin's face as he looked at his opponent. This was the one who looked down on him. The one who had ignored him. He would prove his existence to this boy, prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that his being was the stronger one when he crushed the life from the other boy and consumed him in the desert sands. Mother would be so proud of him. Won't you, Mother? He whispered before disappearing in a cloud of sand. Jiraiya. Today they will see that I am without equal. His godson's voice was like molten steel. There was so much anger and conviction in his words. Do not interfere. I will kill you. Naruto's form was swallowed by flash vermilion light and the blast of a thunderclap. Both Jinchuriki reappeared on the arena floor. Hate was about to give them spiel about not killing an opponent who'd given up but was cut off by the blonde Jinchuriki. Start the match or I will end you. The proctor was only too happy to oblige the boy. Begin! He shouted before shining out of the way. The stone buckled beneath him as Naruto closed the distance between him and Gaara with such speed that not even Jiraiya could track his movements. A cloud of sand moved to protect the awestruck Suna Jinchuriki, but it was far too slow. Naruto reappeared for a split second as his fist slammed into the other boy's chest before again disappearing. Two more flickering images of Naruto appeared on either side of his opponent, as he caught Gaara's head between a pair of vice-like kicks. The redhead had no time to respond to the latest blows as a series of vicious uppercuts launched him into the air. He knew that he was in trouble. His first line of defense, the sand shield, was completely useless against such blinding fast opponent, and his sand armor was breaking like glass under the horrific strength of the blows. How could the other boy be so fast? Before now he'd never even been touched. Now he was struggling to replace his armor quickly enough to soak up the next blow. His jade eyes snapped to the boy on the ground that had just finished weaving hand seals. Fire release. Fire dragon missile jutsu. A sea of white flame erupted from the Jinchuriki's gaping jaws and streaked through the air towards Gaara. He roared in pain as the barrier of sand between him and the onrushing conflagration was reduced to molten glass, which clung to his body like napalm. Crimson chakra surged through his body, and with a sweep of his hand the wall behind him disintegrated into sand and flew forward to duel with the flames. Naruto was long gone by the time that the wave of lava reached the ground. Realization of this fact dawned on Gaara in the form of Demon Child's boot connecting violently with the base of his skull, and once again he found himself rocketing through the air. The ground was rushing up to meet him fast, but he would have just enough time to turn floor to sand and cushion his landing. At least he would have been able to if Naruto hadn't chosen that exact moment to slam a kick into his head that seemed to come from 3 separate sides. Gaara's vision spun wildly as he corkscrewed through the air. That last trio of blows had come dangerously close to crushing his skull into pulp, but he was still able to feel his opponent on the sand that he just made. His hand clenched into a fist. Desert Vice. The sand beneath Naruto's feet wrapped its way up his legs and yanked him down into the rapidly expanding pit so that only his head remained visible. Gaara landed in a cushion of sand with an insane grin splayed across his face. I want to see the light die from your eyes. Desert Guillotine. The edges of the pit became infused with wind chakra before scything forward. Naruto's head was sliced cleanly from his body in a spray of gore. Then he dissolved into smoke. Gaara's eyes searched wildly for his opponent before finding him on a wall some 80 feet above him. As Naruto's hands came together in the final seal, he noticed that his opponent had begun to quickly form seals of his own. Wind Release. Great Maelstrom Cannon Jutsu. Wind Release. Sandstorm Entrenchment Jutsu. The curtain of razor-sharp blades and hurricane-force winds crashed against the sand user's barricade with a cacophonous bang that shook the foundations of the arena. Stone crumbled to dust under the force of the pressure wave, and long, clean gashes were notched into the walls. Gaara's barrier broke, and without its protection the Suna Jinchuriki found himself pummeled into the floor. His Leaf Village counterpart had apparently fared no better, having been launched about 400 feet upward, in multiple pieces, by the air column that the two had generated. Gaara felt a pit of dread form in his stomach as the boy's mutilated body dissolved into smoke. With so much sand in the air, he could easily feel Naruto coming. The only problem was that both he and his sand couldn't move nearly fast enough to launch a retaliatory attack. He could do nothing else but replenish his defenses and wait for the pain to come while desperately trying to find an opening. A resounding bang echoed through the air, and Gaara's eyes went wide as he found himself taken off his feet and carried through the air by a large metal ball. He struck the wall hard enough that it made him cough up blood, and slowly he began to slide to the floor in a crumpled heap. 2 more bangs followed, and the boy howled in pain as the twin projectiles hammered into his chest, most likely breaking a few ribs in the process. He was going to die here. That monster hiding in the dust was going to kill him. And he wasn't even going to look at him. His existence meant so little to the other boy that it wasn't worth the effort to watch him die. Gaara's blood roiled at that thought. Crush him. A familiar voice whispered to him. Bathe in his blood. His eyes glowed crimson and demonic energy began arc off of his body. The searing pain in his chest quieted to a dull ache as tendrils of sand began to lift him onto his feet. Another bang reverberated off the wall, signaling that a metal globe was inbound. Gaara's sand, now flashing with light as though it were made of 1,000,000 flaming rubies, leapt up and caught the ball before crushing it like a tin can. Is that all you have? Gaara droned lazily to his opponent as sand began to rapidly accrue across his body. His sand armor took on an ethereal sheen as the sand continued to compress itself, now just bordering on the edge of becoming glass. The blonde's answer was a bone-crushing kick to the chest which had again sent Gaara skyward. Apparently inspired by Sasuke's actions, Naruto flashed into existence in front of his opponent and connected with a merciless barrage of kicks that appeared as little more than a blur. Gaara continued to sail upward as his armor rapidly started coming apart around him. How? How can he be so powerful? His anger took physical form in the shape of a single flaming tail. He will die before he hurts me again. Naruto allowed himself to plummet back to the ground as he formed hand seals. His godfather's eyes went wide as he saw the sequence of hand signs. "Oh shit! Down!" he screamed as he threw himself against the wall. The Jonin reacted to those words on instinct, grabbing their students and falling prone just as the jutsu went off. Wind release, cannonade doppelganger jutsu. Reality seemed to shatter as hundreds upon hundreds of supersonic projectiles cut through the sky towards Gaara. They impacted against the sand shield with earth-shattering force, propelling the sand-swathed genin through the ceiling on a curtain of metal. Naruto hit the ground, his eyes shining with psychotic glee as he formed a seal with his hands. Katsu! The explosion rocked the entire building as fire, earth, and melted slag poured like blood from a wound out of the chasm in the ceiling. Many Jonin were forced to throw up earth jutsu to keep the entire structure from crashing down on them, and hidden ANBU flooded the room to help with their efforts. Just as the last fires began to die out, a furious roar was heard and Gaara came rocketing out of rubble towards Naruto. The blonde Jinchuriki's look of surprise quickly morphed into a grin of wild excitement. Wind chakra in the sand to counter the wind chakra on his cannonades. He'd underestimated the little desert rat. Though he wasn't strong enough to pose a threat at the present, it looked as if the boy would grow into a fine monster. Someone worthy of the title-tailed beast. Someone worthy of his full power. He shuddered with pleasure at the thought. Naruto moved to escape the Jinchuriki-turned meteorite that was barreling down at him, but found that he couldn't. His legs had been locked in place by the crushing grip of the desert sand. He was about to form a clone and substitute with it, but the sand in the air suddenly became as sharp as knives. It whipped itself into a furious vortex that turned his clone back into smoke. The desert abattoir then focused its power on Naruto, peeling the flesh from his bones in long gruesome streamers. He locked his crimson eyes with those of the other Jinchuriki and smiled. "Kill me." Gaara's right arm formed into a large drill-like protrusion which he plunged into Naruto's head. The appendage ran through the entire length of the boy's body. Anyone else in his position would be unmistakably dead, but Gaara took it upon himself to go one step further. Shikaka's talon. Spires of sand tore their way out of the blonde's motionless body from every direction. The tendrils then doubled back and hooked around his limbs and torso, mummifying the boy. With a loud crunch and a deluge of blood, the sand crushed Naruto into jelly. For a long time nothing happened. The spectators stood motionless, stunned by the prospect that the demon of Konoha might actually be dead. It was common knowledge for most Jonin that Naruto was able to survive decapitation and bisection, but could he really survive when his entire body was a ruined husk? Their attention was drawn by the sing-song voice of Killer B. "Nine tails down? Man, don't play a clown. For him that's a love tap." Light flashed behind his glasses. "Now here comes his bitch slap." Gaara fell to his knees, exhausted after using so much chakra. He had done it though. The blonde was dead. Everyone would know of his existence. As he got to his feet, he felt a twinge of fear run down his spine. That was odd. Try as he might, he was unable to ignore the prickling sensation that had his hairs standing on end. In fact, it only seemed to grow stronger. Red chakra began to arc off of the pool of blood in front of him. Gaara's eyes went wide with terror as the scarlet liquid began to ripple and writhe. Cruel laughter filled the air and seemed to echo from all sides as the blood took the rough form of a human. It ignited in a spectacular display of oily garnet flames. Bone began to rapidly form, followed shortly by muscle and then skin. A naked five-tailed Naruto touched down on the ground, roaring with laughter as he looked at the trembling form of Gaara. "Excellent! Excellent! You truly are monster worthy of my fangs, Sabaka no Gaara." His hands came together in a window-shaped seal. "Allow me to show you how monstrous I can be." An array of complex seals flickered to life on the backs of the boy's palms as he fell into a trance-like state. Releasing demonic seal, restriction systems 3-2-1. The entire room seemed to noticeably darken. Approval of Situation A has been recognized, invoking the right of 9 tails. Demonic chakra restraints have been lifted for limited use, until my enemy has been rendered silent. A pillar of lurid obsidian flame exploded from Jinchuriki's form, swallowing all light in the room. Sinister crimson lightning snaked hungrily up the length of the hellish beacon, lashing out at odd intervals in its quest to sow destruction and misery. The air began to bleed. Rivulets of scarlet liquid rained down from the sky, evaporating when they struck the ground into thick carpet of eerie red fog. Naruto stepped out of the misty sanguine mire toward the hyperventilating Gaara. You have. Wreathed in shadow and flame, he let his 7 blazing tails strike the ground with decisive crack that kicked up a spray of magma. No future. Gaara spun around and ran through the darkness as though the devil himself was chasing him. It was probably closer to the truth than he was willing to admit. A bang sounded from behind him. His sand didn't even slow the projectile down. It bit into his leg with such force that the appendage dissolved at the point of impact, and the Jinchuriki was tossed to ground screaming pain. He tried to crawl away, but another thunderous crack robbed him of his left arm in a torrent of gore. The darkness, laced with killing intent so strong it had him in tears, pressed down from all directions. "What are you doing?" demanded the bellowing voice of the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. "Attack me! Summon your demon! Transform your body!" He reached down and picked up the heap of ruined flesh that used to be Gaara's leg. "Heal your severed limbs and stand." He took a large bite-out piece of meat that he held and swallowed it. "Our glorious battle has only just begun. Hurry! Hurry! Kill me! Hurry! Monster! Mother! Please! Save me from the monster!" Naruto stopped dead. After a few seconds his eyes went wide in a mixture of disgust and fury. You're pathetic. Nothing more than a sniveling lump of meat. To call yourself a member of my great and powerful race is the most egregious insult that I can possibly imagine. Naruto held out his hand. His 7 tails focused the storm of chakra that blossomed in his palm until he was left holding a sphere of utter darkness. "I would devour your flesh, desert rat, but you are not worthy of becoming my shit. Fade from this earth. I will destroy you so completely that not even your memory will remain." Gaara's screams were drowned out beneath the explosion of chakra. Nanabai Rasengan. Jiraiya and the rest of the spectators had fled the tower via the Toad Sannin summons as soon as Naruto had released that pillar of chakra. They now watched as the forest of death was enveloped by a light so bright that its ferocity seemed to rival the sun. The brilliant ocean of pearl flame pitched and seethed as it consumed the land, undoing in an instant what had taken hundreds of years to create. He could hear the girl from Suna crying against her brother's shoulder, as she mourned the loss of her other sibling. Ino leaned against him. Are Sasuke and Kiba and that Hyuga boy okay?" Jiraiya put his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. The medics moved quickly, so the chances were good that with the time that had passed since their matches they were able to escape. But he couldn't bring himself to lie to her. "I don't know, Ino. I hope so." The girl began to cry. Above them, storm clouds had formed from the heat of the explosion. Rain fell from the heavens, the land wept for the fallen as well. The Mizukage looked up from his paperwork. He got up from his desk and stepped out onto the balcony of the Kage Tower. Smoke was rising from Konoha. That seemed to happening quite a lot these days. Such a sinister chakra. Just like that time in Wave. He returned inside and placed his hat and robes in their proper place before leaning his head out the door. "Yukari." His secretary looked up. "Yes, Mizukage-sama? Do you remember where I placed my good hook?" She sighed. "It's where you always put it, Mizukage-sama, on the rack to the left of your desk. How could someone so scatterbrained become the head of a ninja village?" "Right. Of course it is. I was just testing you." "I understand, Mizukage-sama." She heard a rustling from inside the office, followed by a clatter of metal and cursing. "I'm going for a walk, Yukari. Tell Mei to catch up with me when she arrives." Yukari flinched. When the Mizukage went for a walk, bad things had a tendency to happen. "Where should I tell her that you've gone?" The sound of the balcony door sliding open reached her ears. "Konoha. One of their ninjas saved me quite a bit of trouble recently. He also happens to be a close personal friend, sort of. He knows a guy who knows a guy. Anyway, I get the feeling that he's gotten himself into a bit of trouble. Gonna see if I can't go and get him out of it." With a rustle of fabric, the Mizukage was gone.